I'm going in and see if I can get
Can you hear me? Hello, hello.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, you need to be here.
Well, I want to talk to you. So
Let's call them all kinds of four-letter words. Start taking time. Can we restart the meeting and have me do it?
There's already a bunch of people that are that have joined.
So can I just take that
Panelists.
computer then, I guess?
Someone needs to be able to. Yeah, sure. Sure. I guess you could do that. All right. Yeah, it's me. Sorry, I'm just trying to turn it off.
I don't know that Randy. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I just need to turn this to Facebook.
Hey, Brian.
Morning, Brian. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right, man.
Loner reader classes.
Nice.
I'm at the point now where I break a pair and it's like, I should just call in sick. I can't see anybody.
Yeah. I heard the fish.
What's that?
I heard the fish.
trying to figure it out.
What I was thinking was saying something.
Right, we don't know if we can even speak to the public yet, that's what point. Can you mute your microphone?
I'm gonna see if that's it.
Maybe.
I'm not even.
What's that?
How about now?
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
How about now?
Is that better?
Now,
Can you hear us on your end, Sean?
Sean, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Oh,
Okay.
perfect.
Okay, so it's all going through this one, it's disabled on that one, but you guys are able to go. How about you, Megan, are you able to switch panelists?
I believe so. I just need to be able to stream this on Facebook after we got that figured out.
Would someone in the audience say something just so Sean can make sure he hears it?
Good morning.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
So can you quickly write down my number in case you have any questions or any issues?
The audience. Jeez.
Come on, Matt, can you say something?
That's something for the audience. So that-
Did he see anyone from the audience? He just said good morning.
He heard it.
Can you, just to make sure this goes through, attention, of course this is.
I sent an email, so I do it.
What to who? Oh,
From Beth, when I.
so you'd have to look on your computer.
Yeah, I'm working
But
on
she's
it,
got
but there's nothing will load.
Okay, so you logged out of my account and you logged in on something else, okay.
This is fun.
I did send Becky Allman, that information, so she look it over and see if there's anything.
It just lost internet.
Has to do with
Oh,
the
yeah.
super fund
Yeah,
issue.
do that one.
This one?
Yeah, that's the one.
I don't know, it just disconnected me.
Is it worth it at this point? I don't really agree. There's nothing there yet. Just be careful. Sean, are you in your living room?
I don't know if you can hear us because.
I'm
it
in my
just-
sister's kitchen, actually.
Oh, okay.
Your sister's kitchen.
Okay, do we have to stream
So
on
they're on it,
Facebook?
right?
Is that a thing that we have to do? Why don't this thing switch? How do you make this go away?
What is that?
I don't know, I'm trying to get over here, but I won't let this go away.
Oh, yeah, delete. Can you click outside box? Dismiss this notification, how about that? There you go.
Couple years.
Cut that pop up down.
And then, now I gotta. insert some Facebook.
Maria, what if I just start pressing buttons on
I don't know, it's not letting me.
What
I just, it's not like, it just says that it can't.
Yeah, I had two older sisters. I'm not
Well, we're
touching
supposed
it,
to
I'm not
stream it live
touching
on
it.
Facebook.
So I sent an email to Beth to me on how to do it.
I
Trying to,
know,
like,
And
I did all this and it still doesn't wanna let me.
and it was Evan that finally got.
Can we still record if we're not streaming to Facebook?
Yeah, it's already recording.
Yeah.
Even if we're not streaming to Facebook?
As soon as we started
Then
it.
we're not streaming to Facebook, period, so we can start this meeting.
you want me to have Nanette just go up and take care of it?
Why
Nanette,
can she do it from there and we can't do it from here?
They get along well.
Can she
she
do it?
can access Beth's account. Can you?
Yeah, we're on the Clear Creek County account.
Are you still able to do the streaming on Facebook?
Yes, I still have that connection.
Okay.
Then why can't we do it from right here?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Nevin hadn't set me up as it, as
And
being.
Beth had to set me up.
oh,
as
you have to
something.
get authorized access
Yes.
from your account, okay,
Yeah. Do you want me to go grab my laptop?
Could you go
Yep.
do that? And then we'll just get on.
sorry.
No
I don't
worries.
have access.
Nevin gave it to me in just a minute. I don't know if he's available.
No, we can start. It doesn't have to stream right away. As long as we're recording on Zoom, we're fine.
Okay,
If you want to wait another 2 minutes, we can.
it doesn't matter to me.
If we're gonna take the time to try to stream the video as well.
Okay.
I mean, Randy, are you?
I'm not, I didn't have, I was here anyway.
that would be good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't have a bus to catch or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got that sunshine.
But if you were able to join, it's a different, it's a different.
So Beth
I
has to
think
give
she should-
authorization.
I do.
David, Beth has to give authorization through her account, so that's why Megan's not allowed to
Right.
do it. So in the past, Debbie's been able to do that and Nanette have that information, so Nanette's gonna just go. get
Oh,
her
here's Beth.
laptop.
Hey, she's on the road. She's got a seatbelt on.
Really?
Thanks for wearing your seatbelt, Beth. We love you.
I think she might be streaming it.
Okay, well then, let me tell Nanette to stop.
Three of our screens. I guess there's only been one Clear Creek County shows on, is there?
So, I believe, this is Megan's camera, so obviously my computer's there. And then this one is,
That could be bad.
That's bad.
yep, that must be it.
She's
Oh, and she's the host now.
Oh,
She's just in the background.
How can she do that in a car?
On her phone, through
Authenticate.
Facebook.
And I
On her
can send
phone.
it.
Assuming she's got connection, coverage.
She might be in an area that she has LTE. or whatever. Do we want Nanette to just take it over?
What do you guys think?
I can handle
Nanette,
being the host, I just can't stream it.
I just don't know if,
Streaming is the least of my worries.
no, I understand. I just don't know if Nanette can do it well. Beth is doing it, so, because I'm not a Facebook expert as well. Well, you have your
If she makes
computer.
me a co-host, I might be able to do the streaming.
Okay, why don't we just try that, just so it's safe? Yeah,
Try it.
have a seat up there and then,
Okay.
I think
Just
so,
do it from
yeah.
Zoom in, she can
All right.
get to go.
thanks.
Do you want, because I know, I can take over being the person that lets people in, that's what I was planning on doing.
Okay, no, you keep doing that. Let
I
me
don't
just-
know if I have the ability.
Last time this was slick as a whistle, everybody, so we
It did, yeah.
got all this
Very
high-tech
strange.
stuff in there, but
Beth, Nanette is going to try and join as a co-host if you can hear us.
She'll have to add me once I get in.
Okay. You may have to add Nanette as a co-host. Right here.
Do you have a question?
No, I was just making sure you were stuck.
Yeah.
Miss Sean text.
Oh, they are. It's already. Yeah, can I do that for you real quick? He's on it.
Right?
Yeah.
If I have, if somebody, my item is presenting there, they could do the same thing as your back.
Yeah, yeah, it's just need to do my cable.
Okay.
And she has a
Getting
PowerPoint
close.
slide advancer.
Okay.
Mine was not like super slow.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's working, but it's cycling through them chains.
Okay, I'm on his back.
So you should be good when the time's come. At 5, we'll make it
F5. Okay. Thank you, sure.
Or you can click this little bummer.
It may not let me as a co-host.
No,
It's not letting me.
Can Beth get off and maybe you
Yeah.
could be host again?
yeah,
Because I
that,
kind of think that's what,
that's kind of what I figured.
If you're able to communicate with Beth, can you ask her to assign you as a co-host?
Well, I'm there. Okay, maybe she left. Well, no,
She might have lost connection.
there's still
Right,
2
okay.
Quick Creek counties.
Right.
I'm one of them. But I'm not a host anymore because Beth took over as being host.
Okay, maybe I'm.
You are host.
Let me
It
try
says you're
that.
host.
Okay, let me try again. Still says I don't have permission anymore.
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Can you still control and let people in as panelists and stuff?
I would assume so since I'm host, yeah.
Okay, do you want to just make me the host? That way I can just do it all, I guess, if we're not.
Can I plug in your?
Sure.
So yeah, I can make you the host. Okay. All right, it's you.
Where is the options to like let people in and stuff? Do you see it, David? Did you make the wrong Quick Creek County? Here, I'll raise my hand.
Oh, is that the host one?
Yeah, that's me.
It's explained on
Oh,
the
okay.
agenda. Yeah, at the bottom it says calls.
Oh, correct. Now I can't do anything, Megan, because I gave up my host duties.
Oh,
Now,
no.
Clear Creek County is the host, and we're back over here.
Yeah, I think we just.
Yeah, I was raising my hand so you can make it to me.
Who can? who
We're
is
good
that?
here.
Creek County?
Yeah,
What's
but
that?
I was need to be the host so I can let people in, is what I'm saying.
Oh,
The one with the hand raised is me.
One with the hand raised. Maybe just click the other one.
No, I think. You are.
okay.
Okay. I think it should be good.
You got it?
Mhm. I'll move my hand. Is Sean?
Sean.
He might
we're
have just
good to
turned
go.
off his video, so therefore,
He's
yeah,
there.
there you go.
There it is. Ready?
Are we ready to get started?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes,
perfect.
sir.
Nanette, you are first on the calendar. We're a little bit late. Thanks everyone for your patience, but we're going to start with an administrative approval. So just give us a quick readout, Nanette, and we can move on.
Excellent, thank you. This will be super quick. This is just for a approval for Nomadic to do a modification of their premise to remove a licensed area from one license to allocate that previously licensed area to other licenses for their facility. And before they can do any modifications, they have to get approval of a local licensing authority. So that is why they are here today before you to get approval.
Okay, perfect. And I assume you recommend approval.
Yeah.
And we do not require a public comment for this one, correct, Pete?
Correct. Still administrative, yes.
Correct.
Okay, consider it approved.
Thank you.
Chair Wood, if I could just briefly announce an additional executive session. If we have a second, just put it on the record. This is a late item, but still within the notice provision for an executive session. And it's pursuant to CRS 246402-4B and E for the county attorney to meet with the Board of County Commissioners for the purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions pertaining to entering into a new intergovernmental agreement with the Clear Creek Fire Authority prior to or upon the expiration of the current agreement, and to determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiator with regard to a new intergovernmental agreement with Clear Creek County Fire Authority. That will be put on a revised agenda, but I did want to announce it at the beginning, even though we won't go into the executive session till later today. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Anything else?
No, sir.
So we'll start with commissioner updates. I will surrender my time to help us get caught up. Plus, I really don't have anything to add, I don't think. So George, Randy, who wants to go?
No, we didn't.
Just one thing, public comment.
I'm not seeing anything.
If there's anybody there, I just wanted
We
to.
do have,
We do have
I
one
thought
person.
that was at 9.
it's at 8:30.
Oh, sorry. See, now you're confusing me. We usually put it at 9.
Totally my fault.
Okay.
I apologize.
It's okay. Creatures of habit. If anybody came here today to make public comment, please raise your hand, and then you will be moved over as a panelist, and you can let us know what's on your mind.
We do have one in the room.
Okay.
We have one in the room.
Please
Sean.
then whoever that is, approach the microphone, wherever that is. Let us know who you are, where you live, and what's on your mind.
Yeah, so I'm Dave McClone. I live on Sunny Skies Trail, which is up near Miner's Candle. And I'll try to make this brief because I know you guys are busy. And
Thank you.
I've been in IT consulting for 35 years, and I'm always amazed at how hard this new technology stuff is. So I have 2 areas of concern, and each of those areas have 2 sub areas, okay? The first is around Miner's Candle in that area. And the 2 sort of sub concerns I have are, one is security, and I know the sheriff looks like it's represented here. That's good.
Oh, no, EMS.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second is wildfire mitigation at Miner's Candle, okay? So the security concerns are there, and I'm sure you guys are well aware of this. There's been a whole bunch of public security issues at Miner's Candle in the last 6 months, okay? 2 people have been found dead up there. A lady called in 911 under duress. There's been 2 car chases from the police. People have been chased on foot by the police. Some have escaped, some have been caught, some have been caught later. All of this happened in the last 6 months. There's been a ton of vandalism on a particular vehicle up there. It was just towed yesterday. Someone is squatting in the meadow up there. And now someone from the area has spray painted on the side of their camper, moved this piece of S, okay? So that's what's occurred in the last 6 months. So clearly in the county, there's probably no other single area that I'm aware of that has a higher crime rate than Miners Candle, okay? I don't know what is going on up there, but it's attracted a whole bunch of illegal activity as I just went through, okay? So what I'm specifically requesting is that the sheriff's department make a presence in Miners Candle 2-3 times a week so that people are aware that the sheriff is watching, right? And do some just basic kind of crime prevention, okay? I get that the sheriff's department is probably under duress. There's probably a lot going on. And so they're probably fairly reactive. What I'm asking for is for them to be proactive, specifically to Miners Candle, because it seems like it's getting worse. And now people are starting to take matters into their own hands relative to people squatting. And the person that's squatting, by the way, is the person who started the fire, which I'll move to next, okay? So wildfire mitigation in Miners Candle. There's been 2 fires on Miners Candle, house fires in the last 3 years. One of them obviously been ignited, right? And the fire that everybody dealt with back in December, okay? I think the commissioners did a tour up there after the wildfire. Obviously, there was a huge cost in mitigating that fire, and I certainly appreciate the work that everybody did on that. Was excellent, I thought. But I'm concerned, given that there's now been 2 events up there in 3 years, that the code violations that are occurring on Miners Candle are causing those fires and that it's going to happen again, right? I'm sure you saw on the tour, right, that there's a whole bunch of stuff up there that's not under certificate of occupancy, right? People who follow the process tend to get a lot of attention from the county on codes, right? We get a ton of inspections. I've built things at my house. We go through the process. We get a bunch of attention, right? People who violate the process and just do whatever they want seem to be ignored by the county in terms of code enforcement, right? And so I'm specifically requesting we do code enforcement on Miners Candle. I don't care about the rest of the county because I don't live in the rest of the county, right? But Miners Candle has a ton of homes that are not under CO. And that should be resolved or the whole county is going to burn down at some point. We have 2 instances of it in 3 years. If we all think it's not going to happen again, we're just ignoring a problem that's about to happen. Okay, so those are 2. And this is all documented in here. You can see it later. The other area of concern I have is just around county services, kind of in general, right? It seems like over the years, and I've been living here for 21 years, same house, that there's a general degradation in services that the county has been providing. I have 2 examples of that. And I know there's a ton of reasons for these things, right? I get that. The first is at the transfer station, okay? The transfer station used to be open 5 days a week. About 1.5 years or 2 years ago, they closed on Thursdays. And I asked them, what's up with that, right? They said, well, we need to hire people. We got a lot going on. We don't have enough ability to do that. Okay, fine. They said when they would hire somebody, they would reopen on Thursdays. That basically became the new standard, was 4 days a week instead of 5, okay? They also used to do hazardous waste disposal 3 days a week, okay? Three days a year. They had 3 days where they would pick up hazardous waste materials. They're down to 1, okay? So that's a significant degradation in service for the people of the county because that day, I happen to spend in Canada fishing every year. So now I can't dispose of hazardous waste materials. So I imagine people are probably dumping them out on the street, right? Now we're down to 2 days a week at the transfer station. And I know they've lost some people, which is fine. I'm okay with that, right? What I'm asking for at the transfer station is they get back to 5. I don't want them to go back to 4. I don't want them to stay at 1 day a week for hazardous, right? It just seems like that's gone way downhill. And I'm worried that it's going to end at 2, that the new standard is going to be 2. And I know Carl has been helping up there and I appreciate that, right? They're in trouble, I get that, and they need time to fix that. But what I'm saying is, right, the old standard used to be 5. And I don't know why now it's 4 and now it's 1, okay? The other one is Road and Bridge, and I know you're here, right? You hear Carl hears from me regularly, right? About Trail Creek. We haven't had any maintenance on Trail Creek all year. They haven't been up this year. It used to be they'd be up once a month 20 years ago. Well, they were up this week to fix the issue at the Bears, right? And I appreciate that because that was a complete disaster, which it happens every year. And that's not your fault. I get that, right? But that road needs work, you know, and it needs it more than once a year. And I think Carl would agree with that. Again, I suspect there's personnel reasons for these things, right? People quit and we're budget challenged and all that. But what I'm seeing as a trend, right, is this sort of slow ride of degradation of service at the county. And so that's my pitch today, okay? And I don't know what I should do, come back. I'm willing to volunteer, you know, committee, whatever you need from me, I'm happy to help or provide input to or work on, pay for, whatever, right? I'll do it, but those are my concerns.
We typically don't engage in dialogue. Sean's the chair here, though.
Right, that's fine. I'm not necessarily expecting that. I want to know what I should do, when I should come back, what I should expect, but I don't necessarily expect an answer right now.
Yeah, well, you've gone on the record and we appreciate that. And I see the sheriff is here, and if sheriff, you want to pop your head in and acknowledge that you heard what was said. I think that's probably about what we're going to do today. Yeah, but I will be following up with our staff, and this is something that came up after our tour. And like Randy said, this isn't really necessarily a time for dialogue, but I think you bring up some very valid concerns. And another thing I would invite you to do is stick around and have a chance to see our budget conversation, because we're in a difficult situation. Our revenues are going to continue to go down, and the transfer station is an example of a service the county provides that's not statutorily required. And so when it comes time to belt tightening, those are the types of services that are front and center when it comes to us figuring out how we balance our county budget. And we're not the federal government, so we can't print money. We actually do have to have that level of financial responsibility. I think that's probably all I'm going to say. But thanks for your contributions.
And not to engage in dialogue with you, Sean, or you, Dave, just to make clear that Sean was just speaking for himself.
Yeah. Okay. No, there's no, yeah, okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. And thanks, Rick, for acknowledging, you know, the comments. You know, I think the only thing I would, I guess, add is I would encourage the commissioners to look at innovative sort of solutions to the problem. And I'm not talking about like raising taxes, which, by the way, I vote for every time it comes up, and I'm fine with that. But things like outsourcing the transfer station.
Mr. McGlone,
Right.
I'm sorry, I just have to say, for public comment, it's not really a dialogue time, and I appreciate your concerns. We've taken what you handed out. This will become part of the record as well. If you want to set individual meetings or reach out to the commissioners individually, you're certainly able to do that
Okay,
on your own
that's good.
time. But right now, I'm going to have to ask you just to sit down.
Yeah, can you tell me when I should expect some sort of response from the commission on my concerns? I know it's not dialogue, but
Well,
that seems like a
some-
reasonable question.
Yeah, somebody will shoot you an email and we'll get in touch.
Okay,
Okay?
all right. Thank you all
All
for your
right. If
time.
nobody does it, we'll make sure we do in our office.
Okay, sounds good.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment in the room or online?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. With that, we'll close public comment, and then we're already up against our 9 o'clock agenda item. If anybody has anything burning to add from a commissioner update or a county manager update, let's just do that and then move on.
I have two things.
Come back to it.
Should we just come back to it?
I got a couple items as well.
That's fine.
How about we come back to that?
That sounds perfect. So then let's move into our 9 o'clock session, fiscal year 2022 budget update and fiscal year 2023 financial outlook. And as I would like to make a request, I know this is a lot of material. I've reviewed the presentation. My request would be, Maria, when you're going through this, please highlight, call out, and give us a little bit of a color or explanation around the items that are very different between the projections and what's actually happening. I think the governmental transfers was one of them. But with that said, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So we're here today to provide you an update, kind of a check-in with respect to the FY22 budget.
in addition to our thoughts on 2023 and beyond as it relates to the county's financial situation. It's not new news for the commissioners anyway, but it's not a pretty picture. You know, our projections for what our future holds is somewhat sobering, to be quite frank. We've got some tough decisions in front of us. Probably some unknowns along the way as well with respect to what's going to happen with our national economy, our world economy, as that impacts us, the Mali market, et cetera, right? But what I do know is we've got good data. We've got good data. Maria has been working hard with all of our departments, kind of crunching through the numbers in all of our departments' budgets, looking at our revenues, looking at our expenditures. A lot of work with respect to that has happened over the last 9 months. So we do know we've got quality data. Maria and I have met with the mine staff. They've confirmed our estimates for moving forward with respect to their thoughts on their production, their thoughts on future property tax assessments. We've shared our projections with the mine staff, and they've confirmed that for us, that they think we're on the right track with respect to our projections for the future. Quite frankly, despite what we just heard, I think we've got some quality staff in this organization that are doing some really quality work for this community. And by that, I mean, I think we've got the talent in the organization, the talent in this room to make the tough decisions that are going to need to be made. But it's that quality staff that's going to have to help us to provide the right data, provide the right facts to all of you, to the three of you, as we help you try to make the most informed decisions as possible as we move forward with respect to our budget situation. So I do know we've got quality staff out there that are doing good work. So I think we've got a pretty good understanding of the hand that we've been dealt. So the question is going to come down to how do we play the hand out? How do we play the hand out? I think everything needs to be on the table for consideration. At the staff level, we'll be brainstorming as many thoughts as possible with respect to how to help with the revenue situation, how to help with the expense situation, right? So I think everything needs to be on the table. So again, Maria's going to walk through the current fiscal year where we stand today. I think we've got 5 months of data. We're 6 months into the fiscal year. So the data she's going to be showing you is 5 months worth of data. So we'll walk through the current fiscal year as well as our projections. And we are looking for some specific feedback today from the three of you. I've shared the concept of the administrative allocation and the administrative charges with the three of you in our one-on-one meetings, you know, really getting a better reflection of the true cost of delivering services. So Maria will walk through that methodology for you. We're also going to share a different methodology for how to do a market study. We're in the middle of doing a market study right now. We do have quality staff, but I think one of the things that's going to have to be on the table is tightening up our belt. And as staff leaves the organization through attrition, through retirements, through leaving for whatever reason, we're going to have to take a long, hard look at, do we keep these staff, or do we need to start cutting some of these positions? But what that means is we got to be able to pay the staff that remain, the staff that will remain to do the quality work and the quality services we deliver to our community, right, to the residents of Clear Creek. So we're going to present to you a different methodology for doing a market study, because it's based on who we compete with right now. Who are we losing staff to? Who are we competing with when we want to hire staff? So we'll present that, and then anything you hear, any other feedback you can give to us right now as we enter our FY23 budget development process, based on what you're hearing, any specific feedback right now. I'm sure you're going to want to do some deep dives on some of the specifics you're going to hear today. I know for a fact we'll be bringing back the clinic budget to you. You've already requested that. So we'll bring that back, but there may be some other aspects of this budget situation you're going to want to dive into, and we're certainly prepared to do that. So unless you got any questions for me, I'm going to turn it over to Maria and
let's use the time.
Better start walking through the numbers.
All right, thank you, Brian. Commissioners, I prefer to stand. I hope you don't mind that. It helps me when I'm presenting such a long presentation. I will try to be succinct, but I think what's more important is that you have an opportunity to ask questions, that there is no information that you're confused about or don't understand. Want to make sure this is for you today. Commissioner Wood, I'm not quite totally clear on what you were asking, but if I don't cover it, please be sure and ask as we get to it. So this is our general fund. As Brian said, we're 6 months through the year. We really only have 5 months of data fully tabulated right now for you, but I wanted to give you a picture of what's happening so far. Sales tax is up 11%. Good news. We know that. We can tell that when we're driving around the county. We can see that, right? It's done a really fantastic recovery from COVID. We are seeing signs as we're looking at each passing month of sales tax data. We're seeing signs it's kind of settling down. So we do not believe that we'll end the year up 11%. I believe actually we'll end the year about 8 or 9% up for the year. As it's starting to settle back in, we also are hearing that there's some signs of inflation kind of rounding the top here and maybe stop. We'll stop seeing inflation because that's leading into this sales tax increase as well. Folks are paying more for their groceries. They're paying more for their Amazon deliveries than they were in the past. Other taxes are down. Other taxes are right here in this line. And now, while we only expect to receive about $100,000 a year in other taxes, we're only going to get $36,000 this year. And that is because Idaho Springs, the residents there, approved their marijuana excise tax. And we no longer get our county excise tax on those 2 locations in Idaho Springs. So while that doesn't seem like a lot of money in the bottom line in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about $21 million in revenue, but $100,000, that's an FTE and a half, right? That's a couple of FTEs. So every little bit counts, every little bit matters, every little bit helps. Intergovernmental revenues, we're going to fall short. That is mostly grant revenue. That is primarily related to FEMA. When we set the 2022 budget, we put in $600,000 in the forecast. Now, eventually, we probably will receive that money. When we receive it, we're not sure yet. FEMA is notorious in taking a very long time to disperse grant funds. We have FEMA funds that we're waiting on to the tune of $300,000 in the Road and Bridge Fund. And those FEMA funds are related to the floods in 2013 and 2015. We've confirmed with the state, they have everything they need. All of our paperwork is in order, but they are unsure of when FEMA is going to close out that project. So someday, Road and Bridge will get $300,000, and it's sitting on the books as an accounts receivable. It's waiting, but we don't know when. Same with the $600,000. Suzanne Boscia, our emergency management director, has been working very hard to document these FEMA costs related to COVID, and eventually we'll get some money. When, we're unsure. So then on an expense side of things, let's talk about wages and benefits, which is 70% of the cost of running the general fund. We deliver services through people. That's how we get things done. We have quite a few vacancy savings in the general fund this year so far. A lot of that is in the sheriff's office. He's had a lot of vacant positions for a very long time. And we believe that our preliminary analysis of market pay adjustments, we can absorb in this current year what needs to get done in the current year with most of those vacancy savings. Let's see, ARPA funding, you all approved a budget amendment on ARPA at your last meeting, but we're still waiting on direction from you. So right now I'm showing that projection that 1.8 million is not spent and will not get spent. That could change, of course, if you make a bunch of decisions about ARPA and direct the county manager what to do. Then we'll get to work right away implementing your directions.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
So in the 2022 budget or the 2022 projected, you're acknowledging half of the ARPA revenues and none of the ARPA expenditures. Is that correct?
Not close. Not none of the ARPA expenditures, because of course you guys approved $55,000 and a transit bus for 42. So most of the ARPA expenditures. It's pretty likely you'll come up with some more stuff. Will you come up with direction on all 1.8 million for the end of the year? Probably not, right? There's a lot of work that's going into that. You guys are being very thoughtful about how to purpose that one-time money. But right now, because you haven't told us what you want to spend on, you have not given direction to the county manager, I'm presuming it isn't spent for the moment.
So what I'm getting at, I want to make sure I'm analyzing this right. If you take the ARPA out of this analysis, just trying to understand our general fund without the context of $1.8 million from the federal government, that negative 1.4 million increases by around $800,000, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's around negative 2.2 if we're looking at just what our general fund is.
You are exactly right. I don't know if this pointer works, but
It does, it's on the side.
oh,
Or in the middle.
I'm kind of a, there you go.
Yep, there you go.
I don't know where it is. We were planning on losing 2.2, so you got it exactly. We were planning on losing 2.2 million when the budget was set. It was known out of the gate. And if we do spend that ARPA money, we'll end up kind of right where we thought we would from a budget perspective. You got it exactly right, Commissioner. Good point.
Maria, would you explain the transfers in on the revenue? Bottom.
Transfers in, yes, transfers in. So we have 2 transfers in coming from different funds, 40,000 coming from Conservation Trust. Conservation Trust funds, you are allowed to use those funds to maintain parks and open space and purpose them for that. The commissioners approved a little bit of an expansion to the trails budget that is in the general fund. And that expansion was done with the knowledge that we're going to be able to cover that with that transfer in from Conservation Trust. The other little over $1 million comes from the ambulance fund. As you know, we have an ambulance sales tax fund where all the sales tax money is funneled and goes there first. Of course, the ambulance operation is in the general fund. And every year we make a transfer to make the general fund whole because that is what the sales tax is for, right? So we haven't made that transfer yet, but we are fully expecting by year end, we will need to make the entire transfer to make the general fund whole with respect to the cost of the ambulance operations. Any other questions on this page? Thank you for that, Brian. That's probably what the commissioner was asking about.
Sean had a question, he threw in chat, I saw.
He said, yeah, I was just gonna say, he said, I asked you to call out the primary variances with some explanation, which you are doing a good job at.
Excellent. Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on. All right, now there's a lot of things going on this graph, and I really want to take time to explain it because this is really a good glimpse of what's happening here in our picture, our financial outlook. So you can see in 2016, I don't know how to use this. You can see in 2016, the green line is our revenue, money coming in the door. The red line is money going out the door. We had a pretty good thing going on in 2016, right? The world was right side up in 2016. Then you see moving on to, well, actually, let's just look what happened in 2016. Why was it so great? Well, the molybdenum market was at a historic high. Production value, wholesale values matter with respect to property tax. And we were getting a record amount of property tax from the Henderson mine in 2016. Shortly thereafter, they had a big drop off in the moly market, a significant drop off, and they had a huge reduction in force there at the mine. They dropped from 2,000 down to below 400. And we see that manifesting in our revenues as property taxes just kept declining. In 2020, 2021, we have COVID going on, which made our expenses and revenues a little wonky. We spent a lot of money to deal with the COVID pandemic, but we also got a lot of money from the federal government to deal with it. And so you're seeing that happen in 2021. And in 2022, we're actually getting a lot of that grant money now that we already spent in 20 and 21. So then move out in out years and you see our difference between what we're spending and what we're bringing in. Right now today, if we made no changes and we just had inflation and benefits kept increasing because that's going to happen whether we want it to or not, those things are going to happen. We have a problem. We have a gap that's getting bigger and bigger where our recurring expenses are greater than our recurring revenues. So a few things on the right-hand side I want to bring to your attention that are in this financial model that are programmed in here. We assume no new FTEs. We don't assume we're cutting any, but we assume no new FTEs. Average inflation is programmed in at 2.71. If you look at the Aurora, Denver, Lakewood CPI over the last 20 years, that's been about what inflation has been. I know it's much, much higher right now today. Hopefully that gets back under control and we get back to that historic average. That's what I've built in.
Are you using that inflation number on your expense modeling?
Yes, sir. That's a great question. Thank you for that question. I'm using the 2.71 on things like office supplies, contracted services. But the next bullet down, I have plugged in an average wage increase of 3% a year. That's what's called for in your comp plan that the commissioners adopted in late 2020. It is important to pay talent. It's important for people to have hope that there's progression through their salary ranges. And we can't solve the problem by not giving a 3% raise. We still have a problem, even if we don't give a raise for a decade and a half. Yes, Commissioner.
When you say no new FTEs, are you talking about the FTEs we have on the books or the FTEs we have filled? Meaning that we have vacancies right now. Are you counting, you're still accounting for all of them as if we had them filled, right?
That is such a great question. I am accounting for all the FTEs with a little bit of an expectation that there will always be some vacancies every year. Not that the FTEs ever go away, but there's a little bit of vacancy savings every year.
We have the reason I'm asking the question is we have quite a few vacancies right now. And so your projections account for those having been filled. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
All right.
That's a great question. I have programmed in that sales tax will increase an average of 5.3% over the next decade and a half. That sounds a little high for some other communities. For our community, it's actually a little bit more conservative than what we've been seeing. We've been seeing a lot of double-digit increases, but I do believe the sales tax numbers each month as they're coming in are showing us it's going to settle back down into this range. Absent us getting some giant thing like a Walmart or something like that, it's going to settle back down into the 5% range. Average property tax decrease is 1.2%. We saw the preliminary assessment that comes out this time of year. It's not fully complete. The assessor is not done. The state assessed numbers are not in yet, but it's looking like we're going to have another 10% decline in property tax. And that is obviously related to what's happening at the market. So while over the next decade and a half, I expect on average, it'll be a 1.2% decrease, the larger decreases are going to come now. They're going to come this year, they're going to come next year, they're going to come in the following year. But over that decade and a half, I'm projecting 1.2%.
So when I'm looking at the graph, what I'm seeing, where you show our jump from COVID,
Yes.
and which are revenues that came in from the feds to help match our expenses, which also jumped. And that drops back down, and that's going to be that decrease you're expecting.
Correct. You are correct. Excellent. All right, now let's move on to this graph because this graph is our same revenue and expenses, but we lay in our fund balance. So this is our total fund balance. This is everything we have in the bank account in the general fund. And if we did nothing, if we weather these property tax decreases that are coming, if we don't hire any additional FTEs, if we don't cut any FTEs, if inflation runs at 2.71% on average, sales tax comes in the way that we're projecting, we go negative in 2029. We completely run out of money. The bank account goes negative. Now, of course, that can't happen, right? We have to get innovative. I think the gentleman that was speaking, talking about degradation of services, but he was also challenging us to be innovative. We can solve this. We really can. We have the talent here to do it. It's going to take a lot of little tweaks all over the place to revenues and expenses, but it is solvable. It absolutely is. The next thing I want to go through a few things here because I have a couple slides on them and they are factored into this model. So I really want to make sure that you understand them and that you have opportunity to ask questions if you have questions about them. The first is the administrative allocation. We are projecting in here that commissioners are going to approve and be on board with, starting in the 2023 budget, an administrative allocation of over $1 million a year. Now, what that means is for internal services that are being provided to the Road and Bridge Fund, that are being provided to the ambulance operation, they're being provided to emergency communications, 911, we would recoup the cost of the provision of those services. So some divisions here that I'm talking about would be finance, for example. We don't have public-facing upfront counter. We're not issuing permits, we're not charging fees for service, but we provide all kinds of services to the rest of the county staff. And we provide necessary services, right? We run their payroll, make sure they get paid. We do benefits administration. We make sure the audit gets done. We make sure that we have proper record keeping and we stay in good graces with our granting agencies, with regulatory agencies. Very, very necessary, but there's a cost to that, to providing those services. So we worked with an outside consultant to calculate and verify costs that we calculated in finance, but do their own calculation to make sure we're on the right track. And those charges would bring a little over $1 million a year in revenue to the general fund, starting in 2023. So this presumes commissioners will understand this and approve and be on board with this. The second thing that has been built in here is, we told you that we started on the market pay. We've done a lot of analysis. We know that we have a lot of ranges that are under market. And we have a lot of people, when we look at the market pay, that appear to be not even at the bottom of the range. They're not even, we have to spend a lot of money to move them to the bottom of the range. If you think about what's been happening in the labor market, people all over the place, at other governments, at private companies, they've all been getting raises. It's a very tight labor market right now. So we have built in kind of a middle of the road market pay presumption in here, in working with the county manager. And again, we want to get your feedback on a change we want to recommend to that analysis. But this presumes commissioners, again, would support this and be on board with this. The next thing is, I want to bring to your attention is transfers to human services and public health. Human services is experiencing the same property tax decline that we are, right? They get a portion of the property tax. There is a portion of our mill levy that's dedicated to public welfare. They've been seeing the squeeze year over year over year. Their fund balance that they had accumulated in those good years back in 2015 and 2016, it has been going down, 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 down. By the end of this year, their bank account will be dry. The general fund will need to transfer money to them every single year in order to make them whole so that they can pay their staff. We calculated in the administrative fee, and I'll talk about that in a minute, debt service. The health clinic we issued a little over $5 million in debt to build that health clinic. We have to make those payments. We're going to make good on that. We're going to pay our debt as required. The health clinic itself, there was a lot of fundraising done. It was people really stepped up, brought in a lot of money, but we are going to run out of money. And do I need to read that?
No.
Okay, we are gonna run out of money in the health clinic, but we need to keep making those step payments until it's paid off. So the general fund's gonna have to pick up the tab. So that is factored into our financial outlook, that right now today it's looking like in the year 2027, we're gonna need to start picking up that tab, that debt service. So that's also programmed in the general fund outlook. All right, market pay. I want to give you a little bit of background. So you all adopted a pay plan the end of 2020 that was effective in 2021. You say in the pay plan, right out of the gate, the county strives to pay competitively. However, we might have some financial constraints. And then some of the bigger points in the comp plan are that you strive to have the midpoint of the pay ranges 100% at market. There are 3 sheriff positions that in that comp plan you decided to do something different. They're not the same thing, but they're also in the comp plan. And then you say in the comp plan, we're going to tie this market pay to the Employer Council's Denver Boulder Index. And then you also say to county manager, it has to be a living document. It has to be a living, breathing document. There's no doubt about that. People come and go, positions change, duties change. We have to be able to look at job descriptions. So you've authorized the county manager to make non-fundamental changes to the pay plan, but he's to keep the board apprised when there's a non-fundamental change. Now, I need to correct this. I say no pay increases in 2020 and 2021. We actually did a 3% in January of 2020. We just didn't do one in 2021. But inflation and wage increases across Colorado have been significantly higher than that. We just haven't been able to keep up. And HR's been, when someone leaves, they'll have the job description reviewed, they'll check in with Employers Council, they'll see what the pay range should be. So as a single person comes and goes, that single person's pay range gets fixed when we hire that person in, but other people in that pay range get left behind when that happens. And then just so you know, in this market analysis that we've done, all of the work we've done so far this year, there are some positions that are over market. Their range is higher than it should be according to the data. Not a lot, but some. And then we wanted to remind you, and I know you all know this because you all have jobs, you all have hired people, you must pay at the market. You have to attract and retain talent. It's just critically necessary. We have challenges ahead because of that. It's gonna hurt our budget. It's going to be difficult. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about here is we are recommending that instead of using the Employer Council Denver Boulder Index, we are recommending that we use 7 survey jurisdictions and benchmark our positions to those. So we visited with HR, we visited with division directors. Where are we losing our people to? Where are we attracting people from? Where are we losing them from? There's limited housing resources here. It's hard to live here in Georgetown. It's hard to live in this county. It's hard to find a home. It's hard to afford a home. We attract people from the Denver metro area. We attract them from the west side. So we talked about the survey jurisdictions. We feel like these are the most similar to us, and this is where we're losing people to. Now, we did take a look at Gilpin, and if you would like us to study it more, we're happy to do that. Gilpin has some services we don't have. So they have positions like library specialist, they have a tax specialist, they have a digital media technician. They have a lot of positions unusual like that we don't have. They also don't have positions that we have. An example is human services. We do their child support enforcement for them. And in fact, the commissioners signed an agreement with Gilpin a year or two ago to say, yeah, we'll do it for you, but you're going to pay us 1/3 of the cost of this person. So we have a child support enforcement tech, and we do that work for them. They don't have that kind of position. And they have a lot of things like that where we don't have direct benchmarks. We aren't comparable directly. But we are happy to do more analysis if you would like us to keep going and looking at all the positions in Gilpin.
Are we more directly comparable to those other 7 jurisdictions?
Good question. In discussing with HR and who's left in the last year, we're losing people to these jurisdictions. In some it's in here because it is one of the jurisdictions where we lose or attract both. They're close enough that we lose and attract to that jurisdiction. Good question. Okay, so we're going to be asking you at the end here, when we get to the end on this market pay, if the commissioners would support us using those survey jurisdictions instead of the Denver Boulder Index. Administrative allocation, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. I said that an administrative allocation is to recoup the cost of internal services that we are providing to the rest of the people in the county. So it would be finance, human resources, facilities, IT, even some of the county manager's time, even some of the county attorney's time, and even some of your time, the commissioner's time. Of course, you're the legislative body. You make the rules for the organization. You are hearing from the sheriff's division. You are hearing from strategic planning. You're adopting resolutions related to that effort. All of these things factor into the administrative allocation. So we would propose, based on the consultant's study, that starting in 2023, ambulance would pay a little over $300,000 for this administrative allocation. Road and Bridge would pay about $450,000. E911, combination of communications and the E911 fund, they get surcharges, would pay a little over $200,000. And then of course we have some open space, a small lodging amount there, and then the emergency services district. Now, E911, we have a shared dispatch agreement. You all entered into a 2018 IGA with multiple jurisdictions, and you said, we're going to provide dispatch services for you. We're going to run it. The sheriff's office is in charge of the equipment. The sheriff's office is in charge of the employees, and you're going to pay a portion of that cost. And then there's a provision in there that says the county's going to provide overhead services, such as payroll, legal, IT, building services, and all the members are going to fully compensate the county for those services. You're going to 100% pay us for those services. Now, we've never billed them for these services. So we've never billed Idaho Springs or Silver Plume or the Fire Authority. We've never charged them for these services. That we are presuming the commissioners would support, and for the 2023 budget becomes part of the revenue coming into the general fund. Public health and human services, I said I was going to touch on these again. They don't have any money. The general fund is going to have to start giving them money. Well, the general fund's been giving public health quite a bit of money, more than $250,000 every year. We're going to have to start giving human services money as well. The consultant calculated an administrative charge because they have employees and we do their benefits administration, we do their payroll. There's a lot of work that goes into services that are provided to them, but it would just be like transferring it from one pocket to another, right? If we charged public health $322,000 in an admin fee, the general fund would have to give it to them so they could pay it to us, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. But it does matter to go through the effort to calculate it. So sometimes your grant funding allows you to recoup administrative costs. Yes, sir.
Yeah, public health and human services are examples of, we get state funding, right?
Sorry?
We get state funding for those.
That's correct.
And so are there not, there are separate funds for public health and humans. I'm struggling to understand why those funds aren't included in this analysis, because there is state money that's coming in.
You are right. There is state money, but currently the state money doesn't cover the cost to
You're
provide
saying-
those services.
So you're saying this is what it's costing, you're saying that state money's falling short, and this is what we gotta make up
No,
in the previous balance.
yeah, there's two things. So first of all, so human services, let's look at them for a second. So they have several positions, and some of their positions are 90-10 funding. The state picks up 90% of their salary. We have to cover 10. Some of their positions are 80-20. And I'm saying of the 10% and the 20% over the years that the county has to pick up and pay, they have been able to cover that with their property tax, their dedicated property tax. Their property tax has been declining, just like the general fund.
Mhm.
They've been dipping into their fund balance and using it to cover. They can no longer cover. We are going to have to start giving human services money. And in fact, next year as part of the 2023 budget, I think we'll have to give them a little over $100,000 just so they can pay their staff. This is an administrative allocation that we say,
Right.
if we calculate how much in services finance is providing to human services, how much is the county manager's time dedicated there, how much of facilities and maintenance, how much of their time is dedicated there, we would say, please give us $383,000 human services. That's how much you're costing for these internal services. And I'm saying because the general fund already has to give them $100,000 next year, it would be maybe a little silly to charge them $383 because the general fund would have to give it to them so they
I
can pay it.
understood
Got
that,
that?
and I'm sorry if I didn't answer the
Okay.
question right. I was actually responding more to what I heard George say a
Oh,
minute ago,
okay.
so.
George, did I not answer your question? I'm so sorry,
Well,
sir.
No, what I think I understand is that, so the state pays 90% of some of those positions.
Mhm.
If we decide that the cost of some of those positions is the wages and the benefits, and now we're also adding the cost of having that position is your time and Brian's time. If we budget like that, then that 90% that the state gives us grows a little bit, right?
Right.
No?
So,
Because we
understand what
report to
you're
the cost, we report to the state what a cost of an FTE is.
so,
So if we report the full cost, we get more than we would if we're not reporting the full
So-
cost.
yes, on human services, to your point, I do not think public health will work that way because they don't pay based on the cost of a person. They pay based on, you get $40,000 this year to administer WIC. They don't care how much effort it takes. They don't care if you have 1 people, 2 people, if you have a manager doing it, you get $40,000 to administer WIC. So public health's a little different. Human services, I guess what I'm suggesting is it's very important to calculate this, even though we're not gonna charge them the full freight. Because we get to turn around on human services, submit that charge to the state, and the state will give the general fund 30% of it.
That's what yes.
Okay, so you're already
Yes,
capturing that.
it doesn't work that way for public health. That's an excellent point so far, and we're gonna keep searching for grants that maybe it can work that way. But it doesn't work that way right now for public health and state funding. There's a special fund at the state for human services. They will give us a portion of the cost of providing these internal
And
services.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If the cost of delivering the service includes those internal services, then that should be part of what's reimbursed, correct?
Yes.
And that's part of the calculation that MCT does every year.
Yes. The outside consultant, MGT, thank you, Brian, has been doing this calculation for human services only for many, many years and
Okay.
submitting that to the state. The state, this fund kind of goes up and down, like highway user tax. You know, the state is like, oh, we need more of that to cover the general fund this year. Sorry, jurisdictions, there's not as much money available to give to you. That's the same concept with this fund. They allocate a certain amount to go towards this effort and they kind of decide from one year to the next. We believe right now with this calculation that was submitted by MGT, we expect to recover 30% of that.
And I know what you said earlier, you said there's no point in charging that money to that administrative overhead, if you will, to human services, that allocation, because we're just taking it out of the one pocket, putting it in the other pocket. But if it changes the calculation in terms of our reimbursement from the state, then, so have you told me that for years, we have been taking care of that, accounting for that in our calculations where we report to the state so that we can get the full 90% that we could get?
Yes, this is an annual analysis. The state allows you to turn this in once a year, and then they determine how much they're going to reimburse. For the monthly reimbursements where Human Services is like calculating and submitting for reimbursement, there isn't a way to include this in that. It's this annual calculation that goes once a year, and we have been doing that. The state does not always give us 30%. It's been a lot lower in some years, but this has been done in the past.
So you're saying that calculation is outside of your accounting system, so we don't need to.
Yes, and there's a lot of state statute for this specific human services fund at the state level. There's a lot of rules, and MGT is an expert. They do it for many, many jurisdictions. They understand all of those rules, and they make sure that their calculation complies with all those rules. And it's not a very expensive thing to have them do it for us, so we feel like that's a very good effort. But yes, good point. We have been already recouping this. It has been factored in.
Okay.
In prior years.
And Sean, I see you're on camera and unmuted. Maybe just kind of a note of caution as we think about whether it's worth it to account like this, where we're really trying to show in our accounting system the full cost of these services. We have conversations at the state level about what these services that are required by statute cost and how much the state is reimbursing us. So if every county in the state is able to report the full accurate cost in their accounting, I think it helps us with the state to say, hey, look, you're requiring this, you need to help fund it. So that's maybe my last thought on why it might be valuable for us to,
Yeah, I have just a really, really quick thought, and it is, I think just in the interest of being even-handed and transparent, I think it looks a little funny to treat departments differently based on how much money they have. And I think in the interest, again, of transparency, we should be tracking the true cost of government for every single part of our government, independent of how it's funded and any sort of internal transfers that would need to take place.
I think what Maria is saying is, well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're just not going ahead and charging those two funds for the actual cost, but we're tracking what that cost is.
Right.
Yeah, I think as long as we report on that, whether or not we move dollars from point A to point B and back to point A, I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned that the reporting looks the same.
Thank you. That's a really good point. Thank you.
Well said, Sean. Thanks.
Okay, now you already saw fund balance. This is all the money we have in the bank account, this light blue line, these bar graphs. But what the darker blue line is showing you is if we subtract the TABOR reserve and we subtract the working capital reserve that the commissioners have adopted by resolution, we actually go negative before we run out of money in 2027. Now, we've talked a lot about being innovative. There's a whole lot of ideas that we could discuss regarding the TABOR requirement and how we make sure that we're covering it, but help our cash crunch picture for a while. The BOCC reserve, you could decide there might be a year or two in there where you purposely want to go below 30% just to help us get through. 30% is a good number. A GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, which is kind of, they write the Bible for accounting in government. They suggest you have about one quarter's worth of operating funds available always as an emergency reserve. So it's not out of line, it's not unusual, it's a good policy. There just may come a time here in the next 5 to 7 years where the commissioners want to say, we're going to ease back on that a year or two because we just need it to get us through. Property tax at Henderson Mine. Let's figure out, why is this happening? What is going on with property tax? So in 2016, when the molybdenum market was at its historic high, and they were getting incredible prices in the market. Of course, property tax is assessed on that value. They paid us over $14 million in property tax, a single taxpayer. And in 2016, that was 86% of our property tax came from the Henderson mine, one taxpayer. Then fast forward now to 2021, and we see them pulling back on production. You know, they're winding down. They've warned us that that's happening, and we're seeing that happen in the numbers. We see four different colors here because, of course, the general fund gets property tax, road and bridge gets some property tax, human services gets some property tax, and open space. So you can see how each one of these is being squeezed, right? The revenue picture is just declining. In 2021, the Henderson mine provided about 25% of our total property tax. And the problem is the rest of our property taxpayers, the base is not growing fast enough to make up for this big decline from the Henderson mine. This is our reality. As the county manager said, we visited with Henderson mine staff very recently. And they wanted us to be aware, get ready, get used to it. We are closing. And they had in the past published 2039 as their closing date. It could be sooner. They will make that call as they move along. All right, it's not all bad news though, right? We have sales tax, which is actually pretty good news. It's a good news story. So back in 2016, sales tax accounted for about a little over $1 million of general fund revenues. A very small portion of our revenues came from sales tax. But moving forward to 2031, it'll be a significant part of the general fund revenue, and it's growing every year. So it's not all bad news. One of the things you may notice in the property tax picture here is we see that in the year 2027, we kind of reach our low. And that's because all of those high years fall off from the Henderson mine. And in 2028, we start to just grow just a tiny bit in property tax. And that's because market increases in residential values, commercial values, will start making up for the status quo at the mine. Any questions before I move on?
I was just looking at the spot price of moly, which it's not the spot price, but it's the average price. It looks like it's tripled over the last 2 years. And I would expect that to have some impact on what we're talking about right now. And it looks like it's significantly higher than 2016 also.
And I'm not sure. I don't know, Commissioner, how pricing works and when a price is a certain point, where does the mine capitalize on that price? I don't know where that is. What they shared with us when we met with them a month or two ago was the reason 2016 was so high had to do with moly prices.
I think it might have been the 10-year averaging, honestly.
And the higher years, a significant more number of higher years in the 10 years making a difference is what you're saying, Commissioner?
I think the big years were 2007, 2008, kind of like around that time frame, when prices were a lot higher than they are now, and their production, I believe, was maybe 4 times what it is now. Okay. But I would expect that the recent surge in prices, which has happened over the last 2 years, may have some impact. And I think this is a conversation for another time, but I've also heard there being some discussion about maybe getting away from the 10-year averaging so that when things happen, like have happened over the last 2 years, that we can actually be positioned to benefit from it.
And that is a very good point in what you're talking about right now with the 10-year averaging. So because we're expecting another large decline for 2023, the assessments in 2022 that we'll be doing in 2023, that is directly related to another good year falling off that 10-year averaging. Okay. All right, let's move on to Road and Bridge. Very different picture. Road and Bridge is a very different financial outlook. This is 2022 year to date and their spending and what's happening. You can see just bottom line here, we were expecting to come in about 261,000 to the good, bring in more revenue than went out the door. But we're trending now in a way that we believe we're going to bring in about 800,000 more than we thought when we set the budget. I do want to highlight for you that We didn't budget appropriately on the taxes to municipalities. We share by state statute, we give them a certain amount of the property tax that comes in for road and bridge, but we also now will start sharing back 25% of the sales tax. So it's looking like we need to share back to the towns almost $1 million, which good news for the towns, right? That's amazing for them. But we need to fix that budget number so that we have authority to do that. We need appropriation room to be able to pay them. So we believe we're going to need a budget amendment in this fund. We'll bring that back at some point for the commissioner's consideration in order to take care of this share back with the towns. Let's look at the financial outlook on road and bridge. Very different picture. They have their 1% sales tax. And so they'll recover a lot quicker from their property tax declines. That's going to shore them up. You see this revenue and spending pattern here. Revenue is fairly stable with that new 1% tax coming into play. Sales tax, it's fairly stable. You see expenses kind of peaking and hitting a little bit of a valley. And that's, you save up a big chunk of money and take care of a really big road project. Kind of just a little bit of uneven spending, but year in, year out, hopefully you can see this little blue line at the bottom. This is their bank account balance, their fund balance. Year in, year out, it looks like it was a really good fit. 1% was about what they needed. They stay cash positive, but their fund balance isn't growing, right? And by the way, they do have a working capital reserve either. And this plan, in working with their engineer and working with the director, the plan that's laid out for the next decade or so, it's fundable, it works. And here are the projects. And these are the years that these different projects are slated to begin. Another important point on this is this 1% sales tax allows them also, with the funding they get from highway user tax and the little bit of property tax that they're still getting, it allows them to continue with their maintenance programs for crack seal, guardrail, pavement striping, and of course the noxious weed management. So they have the funding to continue with that program. Let's look at the other funds for a minute, the rest of the county funds. We are going to need a budget amendment in the E911 fund. There's two things going on there. There are ongoing costs. We pay CenturyLink, for example, for some of the communication towers, the call boxes. Those costs are more than we budgeted. They're coming in monthly more than budgeted. We know we're going to spend more than we budgeted. So on an operating side, we're going to need a budget amendment. Don't worry, there's fund balance in that fund. They have money to pay for it. The second thing is the sheriff might recommend some additional capital spending in the 911 fund. We're not sure yet. He's working on things. He's discussing things with the CAB board. And he may recommend some additional capital spending. And if so, we would bring that all to you at once for your consideration for a budget amendment.
Do you know off the top of your head what that fund balance is?
400 and something thousand right now. Yeah, it's growing. Yeah, good question. Lodging tax. This is a good news story. We do need a budget amendment here too, but it's because lodging tax is coming in better than we forecast. So we plan to spend $250,000. As you know, we have a contract with the tourism board and we give them virtually all of the lodging tax. We cover the treasurer's fee and whatnot, but we give them virtually all. It's coming in way higher, the lodging taxes. So we're going to have to turn back around and pay it out to the tourism board. And we need your authority. We need your permission to be able to do that. So we need a budget amendment there. And we will do that later this year. We'll bring it for your consideration. Capital project is not slated to spend everything that was budgeted. There are three main projects budgeted this year. The Peaks to Plains project, which is the spending on it moved forward a little bit faster than we expected. We spent a lot in November and December. So that was a prior budget year. So we will not spend quite as much this year as we budgeted. And that phase 2 of that project is nearing completion. It's winding down and we're working on getting all the grant reimbursements on that. Floyd Hill project is moving slower. We will not spend everything we budgeted. We budgeted about $300,000 for that. That will not happen this year. That is a grant funded project. And then of course the shooting range was I think the largest project that was budgeted for 2022. That's not moving at the same pace as well. And I know the county manager would like to have a deeper dive or discussion on that particular project at a later date. But I just wanted to highlight for you, that's the reason why their expenses are projected to come in significantly lower than was budgeted. We are going to need a budget amendment in the Human Services Fund. However, this is another good news story. the state upped the food benefit during COVID for individuals, and they're paying at a much higher rate for the food benefit. And of course, that's a pass-through. But you know, we write the check and pay the benefit, and then we submit for reimbursement. So we're 100% reimbursed for that food benefit, but they're continuing to pay that higher benefit, and we did not expect them to do that this year, but they seem to just be continuing to do it. So we need some appropriation room. We need to be able to cover that for this cost. So that's an amendment that will come to you later this year. The clinic debt service, another area where we need a budget amendment. So we budgeted for the debt only. We budgeted for the principal and interest only. But of course, we know there's fundraising activity that's still going on, so we're paying some fees there. We have a property management company that's handling the tenants that's in that building. They're taking care of some things. There's some costs associated with that. So we will need a budget amendment to cover those things that we didn't think of when we set the 22 budget, when we brought that to your attention. Ambulance, this is where that big transfer into the general fund, it comes from the ambulance fund, it goes into the general fund. Just wanted to highlight for you, we haven't spent very much year to date. That was planned and purposeful, because primarily what the ambulance fund does is we just make a big transfer into the general fund to cover the general fund. And that will be done later this year. Ambulance, their financial outlook's pretty good too. They have a dedicated 0.65% sales tax, and it's pretty good too. Of course, the green line represents revenues, and those are just continuing to grow. And then the red line represents the spending. You see a little bit of a spike here in the 24 to 25 range. And that's because we're carving out some reserve, carving out some funding. We don't know what might need to get done with the Station 2. We know the commissioners have made no decisions. You're kind of chewing on it. You're figuring out what to do. We don't know, but we think there maybe could be some costs related to that. We also know that Station 1 is going to need a new roof. It needs a few things that's built into this capital budget. Here's some of the other items that, in working with the EMS director, we made sure that we have everything laid out through the next decade and can be funded. But one more thing I wanted to point out for you on this is look at this fund balance, this blue line. It's growing and growing and growing as we get in out years. And it's growing in spite of the fact that we have capital laid in, we're taking care of capital needs, we're covering operations. We know that we have to be innovative. We know we have to bring all ideas for your consideration. One of the ideas we've thought of is, could we maybe explore a ballot question to ask our public, hey, when we cover ambulance, when we're done covering ambulance, can anything left be used for general public safety? That's one way to provide a little relief to the general fund. In those out years, ambulance is generating $250,000 extra over and above what they need. They just keep generating, and it's growing every year. So it grows to $300,000 to $325,000 every year. They're bringing in more than they need, and yet we're still covering capital. So that's just an idea to kind of plant the idea. But we're going to continuously bring you ideas of how we solve this problem. How do we get through the next decade? How does the general fund survive? And how do we continue to provide services to the public? Yes, sir.
Yeah, quick question on that one. Do these projections include any planning for costs associated with community paramedicine?
At this point, yes.
It does.
It does. It encompasses that, yeah.
So I think this is an example of an area where we may want to take a deeper dive at some point. The three of you have not weighed in yet on Station 2A and how we participate with the fire authority there. That fifth item there with respect to the ballot question, that's an example of an item where everything needs to be on the table at this point as we contemplate how to address our financial situation moving forward. So
a follow-on question, Brian, does this also include assumptions about receiving help from CDPHE? And I know that we've applied anywhere from $50,000 to maybe $250,000 a year and been pretty successful with that.
Yes, it does. That's in our the total overhead our operation equipment will always be through CDPHE. Hopefully that stays in the 50-50 grant.
Okay, so I agree. I think this is probably its own topic. And since we're kind of up against our time here, I know that the next slide is going to show areas, and you mentioned, Marie and Brian, at the beginning, you wanted to have the commissioners weigh in. So what I would propose is each of us spends up to 5 minutes giving our readout based on what we've heard right now. and then we can continue this conversation later. Does that sound like a reasonable way to wrap this up today?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think the administrative allocation makes all the sense in the world, and my preference would be to apply it universally, just so that we're keeping our accounting the same. My other thought is, you know, we are in a hole, and I think that one of the important things that we should recognize is that we should be careful about digging our hole any bigger. And along those lines, my own personal thought would be, if we're talking in this context or in this environment about creating any sort of a new program, I would want to have maybe 3 programs that we would be able to look at to eliminate or to scale back on in order to create room for that new program and to keep us headed in the right direction when it comes to our fiscal responsibility. I do think that the market pays, I don't think there's any way around that. I think I would rather have some natural attrition and being able to pay our people fairly and competitively, even if that means having to scale back on what we provide or having to find ways of becoming more efficient. And again, I really like the idea for one-time money, like the COVID money, to figure out ways of driving operational costs out of our model, if there's any way to do that with capital expenditures. I have the comparison to the 7 jurisdictions I think you mentioned, if that is your recommendation, I'm totally fine with that. I think those are my initial thoughts. But I do think that the 3 of us need to come up with a game plan to change that graph. And I think we need to have a draft of that before the end of this year and to be able to read into the 2023 budget development. I think I really appreciate staff's diligence, and I really was comforted by the comment that you made, Brian, that we have good data and that we're looking at real data that we can make good decisions on. And I don't think that's been the case for quite a while. And I mean, I think we're responsible for dealing with the truth and for making difficult decisions. And like I said, I think that it's incumbent upon us to start making those decisions before the end of this year. And look at that, I cede my last 2 minutes.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, first off, thank you for this great analysis. And I'm seeing a lot of improvement in the way this is delivered, not just as a result of your efforts, but our road and bridge and the budgets that we saw here show a level of analysis that I appreciate. One of the things you said is as staff leaves, we want to be strategic, evaluate whether we still need the position, all of that. I agree with that approach, and I want to kind of let attrition kind of lead the way as opposed to costing people their jobs. However, I also want us to be strategic and proactive about figuring out what adjustments we need to make, where we need to make them. And so I don't know if we can figure out how to kind of merge those plans where we, rather than in a reactive mode where someone loses, we evaluate the position, we have already kind of done that evaluation. We can kind of start to move people around in the organization to where we want our priorities to be, et cetera. Sales tax growth, just a comment. If you take out the inflation, which is 6 to 8%, you're looking at around 3%, and that's rather pedestrian compared to where we've been at. So that was a little bit of an alarming number for me. I want to see us model the property tax. I want to see us, what's the term? Decompose that model into mind my proceeds, residential and commercial assessments. I really want to understand more clearly the mechanism through which business improvement increases commercial assessed value. So for example, how would improving conditions in the labor market affect commercial property values? Right, that would help us make good fiscal stewardship decisions around affordable housing and other things there. Something that we did in 2018, I wasn't on this board, I want to see us go back and dust that off, is It was part of the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting. We got every public entity in the community together, including a bunch of nonprofits, to look at, and Matt's nodding, he remembers. We looked at what we're providing, what we're doing, where we're duplicating, and built this whole spreadsheet and then kind of put it on a shelf. I'd like to see us go back to that. I think, looking at with our partners at where we're duplicating, where we can not duplicate, where we can collaborate. Those options all feel a lot better to everybody than talking about losing staff or cutting services. So I would love to see that as a first step. On these three questions, administrative allocation, I agree. I think we should be accounting like this. I share Sean's opinion that we should probably be doing it for every division. I do that with a limited understanding of the impact on your workload. And so if the feedback is that actually this is a pretty substantial impact on our costs, then I'm happy to reconsider that opinion. Market pay, we just have to do what we have to do. The transfer station is a great example. When we're not competitive, we can't provide services. And we have to be competitive. And we already talked about, I do support the analysis of the 7 jurisdictions rather than using the employer council data. My understanding is the employer council data doesn't match all of our positions. It's old. It doesn't have data for all the positions that are there. The data is about 2 years old. So appreciate the more in-depth analysis. What reprompt me on the 2023 budget development?
Just based on anything you heard today, any specific input with respect to us going off and building the budget, et cetera. Some of that you just did with respect to the administrative allocation does that kind of thing, and the market pay for that matter. But just based on what you heard, you kind of already did that with respect to your comment about being strategic. And I have a comment on that one. All three of you are done too.
And then my last comment is, I just want to refer back to our public comment this morning. Dave McGlone isn't the only one of our constituents who's recognized that our level of service provision has gone down a lot. I just want to acknowledge that. I didn't want to do it in public comment. I just want to acknowledge that today we're serving our people less well than we were in 2016. And it's important for people to understand why and be in on the conversation about what kind of public services we expect and we're willing to pay for. Because looking at the revenue side and bringing the community in to have conversations via ballot measures is one of the routes that we need to take here.
That's one of the advantages on a complicated subject going last, is everyone else will say most of what needed to be said. I think I thank you for really good work on doing this. And it's clear, as I even watch the staff that's here, that the integration and the knowledge of how all of these different departments come together, that the communication is much better and clearer, not only for us, but also to staff. And it's good to have everybody on the team engaged to help solve the problem at the end of the day. I think there was a lot of really good information there. I questioned that comment about the all-time historic high on Molly in 2016. I think there might be some, but that's not germane. What is germane is that we have good numbers in front of us and we know what the revenues are going to be today. And then we can argue over exactly what year Molly hit its historic high and when we were making the most money out of the Henderson mine. I think what's going to be really important is that we do as good a job of communicating this to the public so that they understand. And I think that we should be I also agree that we should be creating a strategic plan by the end of this year that theoretically changes those lines if we accomplish different strategies. And I think the development of, as far as I agree that market pay is absolutely necessary. We're going to have to do it. I agree that I'm just going to repeat it just so everybody knows I agree, but I don't want to burn time. I agree that the administrative allocation, if not an onerous burden to spread across the board and do the extra work. I know I hate taking money out of the one pocket and putting it back into the other pocket, but if it allows us to more clearly see and understand what we're doing every day. You mentioned earlier that on a month by month, you said on a monthly basis, we're unable to do that, but we always do that calculation at the end of the year. I like a system that I can look at and that you can look at that can tell us exactly what the real world costs are today when I want to know by pushing the button. And so if we can get there, that would be, if it's not too much money to be, if it doesn't cost too much money to take the money out of the right-hand pocket and put it in the left-hand pocket, then I think that is a good thing. I think we then we don't miss anything. We can look at any time. As we develop, as far as this year's budget development, I think that it should be hand in hand with the development of a strategic plan that is a multi-year strategic plan. We should make this an exercise as we develop this year's budget. I mean, that goes hand in hand. We got to build a budget this year that starts moving towards morphing those lines and making them come together so that we don't see that deficit and so that that fund balance remains stable. And it may take more than this year, but our goal should be within the next 6 months in this next year's budget development to show an example of how we're going to do that. And I'm willing to have as many meetings as we have to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thanks,
for that.
Randy and George. You mentioned, you had some closing comments you wanted to make, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the comments. Very helpful. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of them. I think all three of you made this comment that we need to be strategic, and there's no question about that, right? I think the county in the past has taken an approach of, let's all cut across the board 5% and we'll get there somehow. And that's just not being strategic in terms of how we do business, right? So that's been part of Maria's and our message to staff. Sean, your comment about if you're gonna add something new, you're gonna bring something to the table to cut. I've already told staff that not to expect anything new in the budget. If they're gonna propose something new in the budget, they gotta have a corresponding cut. They gotta be bringing new revenue to the table, et cetera. So we're certainly definitely on the same page there. There is no question we're gonna need to communicate with the public and bring them in on this conversation. To that end, Maria and I are presenting to Rotary tomorrow morning, a similar presentation to what we just provided to you. Kind of our first outreach into the community with respect to sharing the message of what our financial picture looks like. But there's gonna be no question we're gonna have to be reaching out to the public, using our new public information officer and getting out there in the community to discuss the situation.
And I just want to say that the reason I mentioned that we need to communicate well with the public is there are a number of different solutions that we may have to resort to. And some of those may include public buy-in and understanding the need for those strategic, moves.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you. That was helpful, the feedback. So ongoing conversation. We'll be back. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Let me see where we are now. Okay, we're at a little bit after 10 o'clock. Consideration of legislative proposals to be submitted to Colorado counties. Is there a staff person who is associated with that one, or is this one you, George?
I'm not sure what it says on the agenda.
Actually, this one's, I think I may have wrote a quick staff report, but it's actually George's item.
Okay, take it away, George.
Distracted by my phone. Okay, so you guys are pretty familiar with this. I think this might be an opportunity for us to catch up. What we had here is 2 legislative proposals to CCI that we have submitted in the past. The first one is permission to propose a sales tax on recreation services and outdoor services. I know this board has talked about it and understands it well, but just for the benefit of everybody else, we're talking about lift tickets, raft trips, those kinds of services you pay for an outdoor experience. And we just finished our budget update, so we understand why we're looking for revenue sources or additional permission from the state to propose revenues to our constituents. This one would be good for us because it would allow the people who are demanding public services, who do not pay into, who are not a part of our local tax base, to contribute revenues so that we can cover their services and make sure there's first response and et cetera. So that's that one. It's recreational services sales tax. The other one is a permissive ability to propose sales taxes on unincorporated areas only. So the difference between the effective sales tax rate at the Starbucks in Idaho Springs and the effective sales tax rate at the Starbucks in Dumont is about 4%. That's because Idaho Springs has a 4% sales tax rate. Currently, counties can only propose sales taxes countywide. So if we propose a sales tax, it increases the sales taxes within the municipalities where they're already sitting at around 10%. So in unincorporated, they're sitting 4% lower than that. So there's some fiscal space there that our constituents may want to say, yeah, we can pay a little more sales tax, and so can the people that are visiting what I recall from years ago was maybe the busiest Starbucks in Colorado, that one in Dumont, can help contribute to our fiscal problems. I probably am rambling here and a little bit confusing things. The last thing I want to share here is just how this unincorporated sales tax base has changed over the last 3 years. When I first calculated it in 2019, that sales tax base was around $36 million. And for every 1% therefore of sales taxation, we could generate $364,000 in revenue. Fast forward to 2020, it grew 54%, so that the revenue potential for 1% of sales tax is $561,000. Fast forward to 2021, it almost doubled. It grew by 75%. The revenue potential per 1% of tax is currently $981,000. So this is an important and growing tax base, and a conversation we really need to have around the state, how counties can have permission to propose to our voters to charge this sales tax on our visitors and help pay for the services that they require. So apologize. Well, I don't apologize, but I'll acknowledge the filibuster. Thoughts?
Well, I'm in support of both. The sales tax one is something that I think actually levels the playing field in the county for businesses, number one. It's not a taking or an engineering of any kind. And I think at the end of the day, we need to find money where we can. And I was in support of it last year, and I'm supportive of it again this year. And we need the state's permission to do it. And with regard to the other one, it's something that's something I've supported for about the last 20 to 25 years since I started seeing the impact of some of those. For one thing, the impact of some of those different businesses in the community, on the community, and to our service, our cost of delivering service. So I think they're both legitimate, but they both require a change in state law in order to allow us to do it. And so I don't have anything to bring to the table beyond those two because we've got a deadline and need to get it in. And I think we have had a policy, just for the public's sake, in the past, that generally speaking, when it comes to going through CCI and CCAT to make or ourselves to make changes in state law, we've usually only done that when three of us agree on that. So it's something that I think we'll have consensus on here, but I'd like to hear Sean's thoughts.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I said last year when we looked at these two. The first one, I think I feel pretty neutral on. It has some impact on Clear Creek County. We have obviously a rafting industry in two ski areas. It has a much more potential profound impact on counties like Summit County that have multiple, much larger resorts, even Grand County. So in some ways, I'm happy to let those other counties lead the conversation. The second one, to me, in some ways looks like a classic solution in search of a problem. I mean, I think it's been pretty well established, at least in Colorado, that city services are funded with sales tax and county services are funded with property tax. And if we're talking about shaking down the unincorporated residents for more money, I don't think there's an obvious connection to their lives getting better or for them not having paid their fair share of something in the first place that this is going to rectify. It just kind of, in some ways, looks like a brazen money grab at a component of our people, our citizens who've chosen to live outside of city services and deal with those services in another way. With all that said, I'm not likely to jump up and down and campaign against it either.
Well, and I don't know if we understand it correctly, but I don't know that it really impacts the non-city residents in terms of the amount of money that they have to spend more than the in-city residents. I think most of the there aren't that many businesses that are outside of the cities, but those that are do generate that significant amount of funds, and most of them are along the interstate anyway. And so the people that are actually paying into those taxes in the largest part are those that are traveling through us. And so we're able to extract from the people that are traveling through us a share of their impact to our community, those that actually live outside Clear Creek County and are traveling through. So I think with regard to the non-residential or non-city, non-incorporated area taxation, it's a tax on the business that's done in those areas. And I think as far as a solution in search of a problem, I think it's a solution in search of some money. And in search of finding a way that we can have a no greater sales tax anywhere else, or no lesser sales tax in order to achieve that extra money that we just saw in the last presentation. But and I'm not saying that as an argument to you, Sean. I just want to make sure we clear that we're all on the same page, or at least understand what we're looking at and think we understand what we're asking for.
Yeah, well, I mean, what you said is true, but it's not complete, because somebody who lives in unincorporated Clear Creek, should something like this be approved and pass, and I don't know, 4% was a number that was mentioned somewhere. I mean, that's basically a 4% increase on every single online purchase that any of us make, and also our automobiles, which are large ticket items such as that, from here on out. So that's not something that I don't look at seriously.
Fair enough.
Yeah, thank you. And I look at it seriously too. And the way I look at it is just relative to the other options. I think I'd rather have a sales tax than a property tax, even in the unincorporated area. And the reason for that is because a big portion of that sales tax is paid by our visitors. No portion of the property tax is. And so, but I don't intend to debate this with you here. I guess my ask, Sean, is that, this is an idea that needs work. And I think that it can be another tool in the tool set for our communities to decide how much and how to fund public services. And this just gives them another option, an option that some may look at as better.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not going to, I think in the context of a CCI with one county, one vote, proposals like this probably don't have a high high probability of success. But with that said, like I said, I'm not going to oppose it.
Yeah, I think it's fair enough. It's a permissive tax anyway. We're talking about creating a state law that permits local governments to be able to do it. Then they can choose whether to do it or not at the local level.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yeah.
And this didn't come up in the last presentation, but half-cent increase in general sales tax to our bottom line is a game changer. And we're not suggesting that we need to raise taxes right now. We need to sharpen our pencils internally. We fully understand that. But if Maria punches in a half-cent sales tax increase to our bottom line in that model, and it changes everything. It changes everything. And no, again, we're not recommending that, because again, we need to tighten our belt and make sure we've strategically organized ourselves in such a way moving forward that's going to make sense, right? But it is a game changer.
You're talking about a half-cent across the entire county though, right?
Yes, but even across the unincorporated would be huge.
Yeah. All right. Any other closing comments, George, before we move on?
Yeah, and then I'll make a motion. I just, the real next step on this is to replicate this analysis that I performed. It's in your packets for Clear Creek County, statewide. And I've shaken some trees around the state. We really need to figure out if the fact pattern in Clear Creek County holds across the state before this thing will have legs. And so something for this board to think about and something for our staff to think about is how important this could be as a potential solution for us and whether it's worth investing our own analytical time and taking that step. I know the data is available and someone with good data management ability, it's probably a 3-4 hour project. So that's my last comment.
Good.
So in that case, I'm gonna make a motion that we approve both the CCI legislative proposals that are in our packet today.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, I'm going to abstain from that vote. So that motion passes 2-0.
Sean, do you, in
And-
your mind, does that constitute consensus? Just one
Sure.
quirk of the CCI policy is that we do need a consensus of the board to pass these along.
Yeah, you know what? I don't feel that strongly about it since it's going to go in front of the full board. So I'm happy to amend my vote to a yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, let's see. So we're at running a little bit behind. Consent agenda. Do we need to pull any items from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll just give it a quick read. Item number 1, consideration approval of the warrant register. Number 2, consideration approval of the June 28th, 2022 Board of County Commissioners meeting minutes. Number 3, consideration approval of agreement for professional services for the Collaborative Care Clinic capital fundraising services. And that's it.
Move we approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Just like that, we're caught up.
Ahead.
Do we want to take a quick break, or do we want to squeeze in an executive session? What do you think, Peter?
I don't think we can squeeze executive, but what about commissioner update or county manager update?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Oh, let's do those. Yeah, let's
I
do
could use
those.
a quick break, but
Yeah, I could do 5 minutes before 10:45 of break time, but should we jump into commissioner update now?
Yeah, why don't we? Your pleasure.
Let's just get started. Ready?
Why don't we take a 5-minute break now and come back or let's say come back at 12:35, or I'm sorry, 10:35, and then do the updates and then roll into the next agenda, the last agenda item.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, because you're only. And Fry has,
Yeah, I don't know why it did that.
they'll have cannons.
Maria did a great job.
What we should probably do is
Stop
just
video.
designate an area, count it off.
Okay,
And they'll
despite
run
the
just
curveballs you guys
it's
said.
done.
Yeah, she's
I can't imagine.
understandably seemed a little nervous at
That's what
first.
it's feeling
She did a great job. I know she was, this is the most important thing to the meeting she's had with us since she got
Do we get
here.
the ceiling
So
out?
much information.
It was great,
Yeah.
it was great. Yeah, she did a great job.
I don't think we can get end dumps in there, so you're gonna have to ask them for
Julie
tandems.
plugged in, it took over the whole screen.
That'll cost
It should.
more.
That's the HDMI that.
That has-
That's not what happened when Maria plugged in.
That's because she had something set up on it because of, we weren't to that agenda item yet.
We have to look at
Okay.
the length of that.
Okay.
She did something, she blacked her screen out or something, so it wouldn't pop up immediately.
Yeah, they're
Well, she-
basically.
but when she did plug in,
Yeah.
you could see
that parking lot.
didn't take over the whole Apple screen.
Who's didn't?
Maria's.
Correct, she had some settings set up so it wouldn't because we weren't to that agenda item yet.
Because that's good.
No, I mean, even when she got to that
Oh.
agenda,
Say that.
it responded differently.
Yeah, southwest corner.
It should pop up immediately when you plug it in.
As everything else.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the default.
Pull out the other end.
So it wasn't doing that?
Okay.
When Maria plugged in, it was still
Yeah, you
showing
can
Zoom
either
windows
self
and
or
the,
No, what I'm saying is what you want right now. When we plug that in, we want it to go live.
You've got all that contact information.
Right. but
Okay.
Are you saying it didn't?
I'm saying when.
It was different on the different
When
screens.
Julie plugged in, it was different than when Maria plugged in.
It's kind of like the smallest. Front end loader back other thing, and now I can take care of this.
Because I think on your Zoom, you can choose which screen you want.
That's what we want.
Yeah, and they ran.
We want her to be able to
Okay.
present.
It was just a different, I didn't notice that you can see the Zoom meeting in the corner.
Yeah, we want her to present, so.
Okay, yeah, but we'll wait till it's her turn. Got it.
Easy peasy.
Thank you, sorry, I was confused.
Better than you.
And Maria had a different share screen setting,
Oh, okay.
so.
Okay, no, no worries. It's just always nice when you plug an HDMI cord and it actually works, right?
Right, yes, yeah.
Wrestled a lot in other meeting spaces and things like that.
Do we have folks we need to cross over?
We will, but we're doing commissioner
Yeah.
updates, so,
You have to,
you there's help that.
me point those out.
yeah.
How long is your presentation?
Sean, what's your
It'll be
pleasure?
about
Should
an
we
hour.
use these 5 minutes or?
Yeah, let's just do that. I mean, maybe Brian, start with you. You mentioned there was a couple things you wanted to get out there, and then let's see where we're at. If we end up running 5 or 10 minutes over, I think that's okay.
At our last meeting, George referenced an opioid conference and a request to move the August 16th meeting. So we need to figure out what we're gonna do with our meetings in August. Related to that, Summit County has reached out to us and wants to hold a joint meeting. Randy and I had a chance to speak about that. I'm not sure I had a chance with Sean and George, but so Summit County has reached out. So we need I need some feedback on when you might want to meet with Summit County. They're proposing a Tuesday morning between 9:30 and 12. Although they would accommodate something else. So Tuesdays being our normal meeting dates, do we want to use one of those? Just for point of reference, August 16th was the date that we were going to be bringing you the consideration of a lodging tax ballot measure. So I don't know from a timing perspective on when we need to bring that ballot measure to them. But that was something that was gonna be on that August 16th agenda. So a couple things there. When do we want to move that August 16th meeting and when do we want to meet with Summit County?
So Summit County wants 3 hours of meeting time. Did they indicate an agenda?
They just said that was a time frame.
That- That's a window within.
That's a
which they-
window.
Did they say how long they would like?
They did not say how long, they just said that they typically meet between 9:30 and 12, the agenda to be built between the two boards. So they're not suggesting an agenda or anything, but they want to do a joint meeting.
So they don't have a particular item that they brought up, they just wanted.
Not that they've shared with us yet, no.
Okay.
I mean, we could select a different Tuesday in August to hammer out both the meeting that we would have had.
I'd suggest something like up to an hour or something like that.
Just depends on what the board's pleasure is.
What do our meeting agendas look like for the month of August? I know this is the only meeting we're doing in July. I know the summers tend to be a little quieter than some of the
Yeah.
rest of the year.
We were, well, right now, August 2nd has a Floyd Hill project update from CDOT. Electric vehicle readiness plan presentation from Iconergy. We were planning on a work session to discuss the potential of a lodging tax ballot measure. Those are the main things right now that are on my list. In August 16th, the meeting in question, we were discussing the IHOP grant with you in a work session, the new grant we got from DOLA in partnership with Idaho Springs. And again, in addition to the consideration of the ballot measure.
But we're being asked to change August 16th to another date.
That was
now.
George's request to change August 16th.
So the
And
first-
just looking at my calendar, my 2nd and my 9th are completely already reserved for county business. So if we wanted to use one or both of those, that would work for me.
The 2nd is already a meeting.
Yeah, so we already have a meeting on the 2nd.
Mhm.
How about the 9th?
It looks
Or the
like
23rd.
we have 5 Tuesdays there.
Yes, because
The 23rd seems like a natural fit if we're all
Yeah.
available.
I agree.
Does that put any undue burden with regard to the ballot measure? Should we be moving forward?
No, as long as we approve a ballot measure, if that's indeed what we're going to do, we have to get it to the clerk by the beginning of September. So as long as we approve a resolution with the ballot language in there by the end of August, we're fine. And we even have a few days. The thing is our first meeting technically is not until the first Tuesday in September, which is September 5th. I think the deadline this year, 6th, is it? So I think the deadline to get the ballot measure to the clerk this year is September 3rd. I can double check that. So the point is I'd like to get it done in August
23rd
regardless.
would be perfect then. So we could move the meeting on the 16th to the 23rd.
What was the deadline to notify our intent?
So we notify our intent to place a measure on the ballot by July 29th. So we're fine on that. We have time on that.
And currently you have direction to do that, right?
Yeah, I already have direction from the board to do that, and typically it hasn't even been done formally. I put it in a letter. Some years we've done it in a letter, some years we just let the clerk know.
That can always be withdrawn if for some reason we should change.
It's
it.
just notice, absolutely. It's no obligation.
So-
Either the 9th or the 23rd works for me.
My preference is the 23rd if we're all available.
Yeah, I'm leaving on my annual bike tour on the 22nd and I'm out till Labor Day.
Oh, good night.
We could do
leaving on the
another
22nd, Sean?
we could do a non-Tuesday also sometime before the 22nd.
Yeah, I mean, we could look at,
Got a problem with the 9th? Is that the-
17th?
no, I don't have a problem with the 9th. We could do the 9th. It just, I'm not sure it gives us.
It's 2 weeks, it's 2 meetings in a row.
Yeah.
What about the 17th?
17th or 18th both work for me, or 19th.
CCI Mountain District meeting, we don't have to attend it. 19th is pretty good for me.
So the 17th doesn't
I'm
work.
looking.
17th can work.
What purpose is that?
Prefer 19th.
Okay.
Project support has a meeting I'd like to attend.
Actually, 17th, 18th, 19th, all can work for me. I've got a meeting with some guy called Brian Bosshard. I can change that.
Sean, 19th?
Yeah, it's fine.
Great.
Do we want to propose to Summit County for that day? It is a Friday, so I don't know how that's.
19th is
Let's offer them on the 2nd.
August 2nd?
Yeah, and I'd be pretty curious to hear, before we decide how much time, what they want to talk about.
yeah, me too.
Are we concerned with having the work session of the lodging tax on the same day? Just in terms of time, and just want to make sure you guys.
Based on what I interpret from hearing that they don't even have an agenda item for us to discuss, I can't imagine us discussing an unknown topic for more than 2 hours.
Well, but we have control on the other items, so I'm not worried about it. So we can make August 2nd work for Summit County. Okay, so propose August 2nd to Summit County, and we're moving the 16th to August 19th.
Friday.
Yep. All right.
My only preference would be if we can to do that one in the morning.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. I'm assuming 8:30 start August 19th.
I think that's perfect.
Okay, and then just one last item, the lodgers tax survey went live yesterday. We got over 50 people have taken it already, so people are taking it.
Okay.
I'm done.
I'll just jump in.
Anything else, Brian?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
First thing on my update, went to the transfer station on Saturday. I'm a user, I'm a customer of ours, and just wanted to offer some comments. Line wasn't long. Things were, from my experience, really smooth, which is a testament to the excellence of our staff, right? Because I know it's not smooth on their side. Bob Tiedemann was there. Carl Shell was there working on a Saturday. Stephen Buss was there, who is in our road and bridge department, coming over there to help out so that we can provide this service. So I just want to express some gratitude to all three of them, and particularly to Bob Tiedemann. It was very clear to me that the last couple months have been hard, and we've all been in hard situations where you just got to dig in and get the work done. And I just want to acknowledge what he's been doing for us. I don't think there's an amount of money you can really pay to make an experience like that worth it. He's clearly doing this because he cares about the community, and just want to express some gratitude. St. Mary's, a quick thing. We have discussed a meeting to discuss the shooting in the St. Mary's area. We have scheduled that for the evening of the 19th, am I correct?
27th.
The evening of the 27th, thank you.
At 4 o'clock.
At 4 o'clock. What we need, what came up since is, initially this was to discuss the shooting that's happening up there. Since they've asked to discuss the transfer station and what was the other? Oh, and the condition of some roads up there. I'm not exactly sure how to respond to that. Didn't want to respond on my own without talking to the board. I know we do, like with the merge, we'll go and meet with the community and do kind of a town hall and bring staff. I don't really want to ask our road and bridge and transfer station staff to take the time, because I know what they're up against right now. So I just wanted to hear some feedback about, I'm happy to attend the meeting and speak to what I know on all those topics.
I can cover that piece, so they don't have to be there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest as well.
Okay. Are we agreed then? And we'll cover all three of those topics. Brian will be in attendance, and we're good to go.
Yeah, understandably, people want to talk to us about things that they're concerned about, but it doesn't have anything to do with the people that do that job not working as hard as they can to get it done. So there's more back.
And my understanding is that the people from St. Mary's will be at the Alice Schoolhouse. Most everyone else is going to appear by Zoom, or?
I am.
Okay.
I intend to go in person. I apologize. In my imagination, they would have, just like we did when we were talking short-term rentals, they would put a computer on a podium. When people that are in person want to come talk, they stand in front of that camera so that remote viewers can watch. I don't know that it makes sense to try to operate a Zoom meeting out of this room at the same time.
No, and that's fine. I knew that there was some discussion of it. I was intending to appear by video.
I think that's
on that meeting.
I'm
as we went
expecting
up.
to also, because I have to.
Yeah.
I think I will have.
My only comment is, I think in some ways it's unfortunate that the eastern part of the county is the only group of citizens that gets the opportunity to get regular updates from the county. And I'm talking about the emerge meetings. And I would maybe even encourage the group from St. Mary's to think a little bit bigger and maybe invite us up there, if not once a quarter, maybe twice a year or once a year. And then there are other areas like DLD and the towns too. I think that that's something that's part of our job that we don't necessarily need to wait to be invited to.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. We used to do town halls throughout the county, and then COVID came, and so we should probably get back to that.
Yep. But I'm good with the date, and I would prefer to be there in person, but we'll kind of figure out how things are going that day. Anything else before we roll into our last agenda item today? Randy?
Yeah, so last one on my update, just a quick one. Silver Plume has passed short-term rental regulations. Their model looks pretty similar to Georgetown's. And so it's not exactly duplicative of ours. There is an interest from Silver Plume in having our staff process their permit applications. It's something that we've kind of talked about informally for a year plus. And so just wanted to discuss, I think what we really need is a formal request from Silver Plume for us to have that conversation. And if everybody's agreed, I'll pass that back to Sam.
Sure.
I think that sounds fine.
Yeah. They, just a little bit more background. I know they set their fees in consideration of what our fees are so that they could cover the cost.
Might be helpful for us to have a conversation with them first before it gets to a board meeting, so we can kind of understand process wise what that means. And
would you like to just, rather than ask them to set up a letter, send a letter, would you like to just?
we can certainly reach out to the mayor and if that works.
Fine with me.
Yeah, okay.
That actually reminds me of something. I got a call a few days ago from a citizen of St. Mary's asking about the county's cap, and that person had heard something that there had been a change in what had been going on over the last few weeks. And I just wanted to, and this is probably mostly I'm asking you, Brian, are we at the cap? And has there been any other triggers or any other changes in our policy this summer?
I don't believe we are at the cap. We have a few remaining short-term rental permits available.
A few, you said,
A
right?
few, yeah. Maybe what, 3 or 4?
Between 2 and 4.
Yeah.
Left.
Between 2 and 4, have you heard that, Sean?
Yeah, I did. Thanks. And maybe I'll pass that back to the person called. But confirming there's been no other changes. That's kind of the status quo from our meeting last year.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, George? Anything, Randy?
Well, I didn't do one yet. Real quickly, I'm going to be on a couple of panels next week at NACO. One on tribal relations, and I mentioned this before. The other one on it's a responsible recreation panel at the National Association of Counties on Saturday, presenting the NOCO model. And with regard to NOCO, we've kind of also a real interesting development there, and it plays in perfectly. I think the scheduling on it with our ROM is we're going into a codex, using the codex model to layer all kinds of things besides just hotspots. So we're proactive rather than reactive. Instead of being reactionary and just identifying a problem, going out and fixing a problem, and then fixing a problem over there, we'll be putting everything from sensitive ecological resources to trends in recreation, to the kinds of wreck that's happening in different places, to mobility data for how many people are in certain places at a certain time that's going to inform. And when I read through the ROMP schedule, I thought it could dovetail pretty well, because a lot of that data, some of the mobility data and a lot of those layers that exist already in terms of trailheads, infrastructure, and things like that that are already on maps by the end of the year, will probably, by the end of the year or by the end of winter, certainly will be in place. A lot of that will be done. And then I think the next, Julie can even speak to this, and I'm sure you will, but one of the next things that follows that is going to be some quite a bit of intense surveying going on that I think is taking place next year by the time we get to it. So all that's going to play into the ROM pretty well, which is nice. And over at the CE, we have gotten fully committed the funds from enough folks, assuming a $7,000 contribution where we've been paying about $65,000 a year in support there, we'll be down to about $7,000. And we have enough people to come up to about $63,000 to cover the operating cost over there. And we think we can drag a couple more people in. If we can, then we'll be in really strong shape going forward. We will be the fiscal agent until at least the end of the year. However, we will be charging a fiscal agency fee for any of the work that we do for managing that fund and paying folks off. So, and that's it. I think we should move on to the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Randy. And for those of you who are here to watch the ROMP presentation, we ran a little bit late, so please forgive us for that. But with that said, I will turn it over to you, Amy.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wood. And welcome everybody. We do have a fair number of people in the audience here in the room live. We also have a lot of people observing online. And so you guys will, came to watch, we will keep you in as an attendee. And with us here in the room today, we have Julie Shapiro, who is here from Keystone, and Alex. Alex, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. There's too many consonants for me.
It's Belenz.
Belenz. Alex Belenz is from the SE Group, and those are the two main firms that are going to help us with the ROMP project. ROMP is the Clear Creek Recreation and the Outdoor Management Planning process. And this meeting is to formally launch, and we're really happy that we are starting this project. We've executed our contract, and the purpose of today's meeting is to really start by sharing with you, by reviewing our scope of work, what our plan is going to be, what we envision happening for the next, really the next 18 months, but focusing, I would say, sort of on the next immediate 3 to 6 months, and talking about what are the roles for different groups, what are the roles for land managers, what are the roles for various subject matter experts in the community, how we'll be engaging community members, since we want this project to really be focused on community engagement and make sure that it's a very community informed planning project that allows us to come up with ways to grow and manage recreation responsibly. I think everybody understands who lives in Clear Creek County that recreation and natural resources and recreational assets are a huge element of our lives, our community, of tourism, of visitors, of our economy. But how we manage that responsibly and sustainably in a way that preserves and conserves those resources in a resource constrained environment is really a puzzle, and one that we haven't quite figured out yet. Everybody knows the phrase, "We are getting loved to death" here in Clear Creek County. I think people understand that every weekend, every day. And so we want, through this recreation plan, to identify some key projects. We want to identify some and design some partnerships and identify some funding sources that will help us more sustainably manage those recreational assets, manage our recreational facilities and processes, and the way we invite and welcome people into our community to recreate, and most importantly, the recreational assets that we as a community enjoy ourselves. We will be looking a little bit at what we have planned. Julie's going to walk us through the scope of work document as a way to sort of launch this process. I want to just mention really quickly a couple of things that sort of fell into this, what I'll call sort of phase 0, for lack of a better word, is our two topics, one of whom the commissioners we have presented to you, we shared with you late last week, which is a draft of an initial recreation user survey that will provide some data that will help us inform some of these early meetings. And that is a user survey that will be distributed to trailheads and maybe some key places where recreation users might congregate after they've gone out and used our lovely resources. But the idea that we wanted to get that in front of you and get that launched as soon as possible, so we had a chance to collect that data and make it available to the various teams we'll be convening. So that's why it sort of got ahead of this meeting, so we could get your feedback on that and get that launched ideally tomorrow. So that rec user survey will be out and about and is intended for people recreating that day. You know, did you recreate today? Yes. Okay. Could you answer a few questions about what you did today? And as Julie will talk about in the scope of work, there'll be significant additional
questions we'll be asking and data we'll be collecting throughout this project. So with that, I think I will hand it over to Julie, who will share her screen just to review the Word document that talks about the scope of work. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, so for better and or for worse, we're not going to do PowerPoint slides today. We're just going to kind of take a look at what you've already seen as part of the contract we just launched a couple weeks ago, and with the holiday week especially, just have been focused on getting those initial research tasks out, as Amy mentioned. But I just want to kind of give you a big picture view of what we're working on, and then happy to take any fine-tuned questions. I'm Julie Shapiro. I'm Natural Resource Center Director at Keystone Policy Center. We're a third-party nonprofit, non-advocacy organization that focuses on helping people reach higher common ground and solving complex problems. We work on everything from education and health policy all the way through natural resources and agriculture and energy. And my work focuses primarily on intersections of public and private lands, and everything from wildlife, water, recreation to agricultural uses and beyond. And so I've done a number of projects related to recreation and conservation, as Amy mentioned. And Alex here is representing SE Group, which is Keystone Policy Center's partner in this effort. And Alex, do you want to just introduce SE Group really briefly?
Sure. So SE Group is a outdoor recreation focused consultancy. We have offices in Frisco, Burlington, Vermont, where I'm based out of, in Salt Lake City. And we do a variety of planning and design work around outdoor recreation, from ski resorts to trail systems. And we do some community planning work as well. And so that's a little bit about us.
Great, thanks, Alex. And Alex has team members based in Lake and Summit County as well, so nearby neighbors. Thank you to the commissioners for having us here today. We're glad to be able to be here with you to kick this off. And so two things I want to emphasize first before we just outline the tasks of the scope of work. One is just a general principle and approach around equity and engagement, equity, and inclusion. And we're just really looking at this from the angle of how do we bring those, most impacted by decisions regarding the ROMP into the conversation. And so first and foremost, that's the community, and we want to make sure the community has a meaningful voice in the conversation. And you'll see that the way we've outlined this approach is really meant to help bring community voices and stakeholder voices in various ways. And we want to be clear on how we're going to use that information throughout the process. So that's one key principle. I won't go bullet by bullet here. And the other thing that we really are bringing to the thinking around this is the integration of systems and site-specific considerations. So both as a county as a whole, we're thinking about, what are the overall challenges and opportunities for recreation and conservation. And so how do we think about any one project or opportunity in relation to the overall countywide recreation landscape? And then also beyond the county, Randy mentioned NOCO in his earlier remarks, we're trying to think about how does what the county's doing connect to that regional planning process. And we think there's specific opportunities for those processes to talk to each other and learn from each other, while also recognizing this is fundamentally a community-driven plan that has implications and partnerships that can affect those of our regional neighbors. So we'll be thinking about that throughout the process. Our scope of work, and the page break is unfortunate there, hold on, really outlines 5 tasks, but the first is project management, and the last one is let me just close that header and footer. The last one is about preparing a final report, so I won't really talk that much about those 2 tasks. We're going to focus on the 3 tasks that are research, and then leadership and stakeholder engagement and community engagement. What I will say in terms of project management is that we really anticipate working very closely with Clear Creek staff throughout the process, weekly, daily if needed, and making sure that as a team we're well integrated. We're bringing both Keystone and SE Group's expertise to the table, because Keystone's role is really, we're your prime contractor, and our role is in bringing together the different perspectives and voices and facilitating this overall process of visioning goals and priorities and plan development. But as I mentioned, we're non-advocacy, we're third party. We're not going to bring a specific, lens or advocacy or expertise to recreation planning itself, although we, as I mentioned, we have a lot of experience working with stakeholder and public forums on those topics. And so that's where SE Group's expertise in actual recreation planning comes in, because they'll be able to, do the research, work with the county staff on the mapping, and be able to kind of look with their critical eye and their experience and having done recreation planning across the country and say, hey, here are some opportunities. So their subject matter expertise really comes in there. And so that's how we'll play off of each other as a team and working with staff. So let me just at a high level tell you about each task, and then we'll dig deeper. One of our tasks is research and analysis, and that comes early, and Alex can talk more about that, but that's really understanding the current landscape and understanding all of the plans and existing kind of thinking that we're bringing to the table into this process, because we know it's not being created out of a vacuum. The second task, and so that will provide foundational information to the other tasks, which are really about working with community stakeholders and partners and subject matter experts in helping to identify visions and goals and priority projects, and to build those projects out in a way that gets you to a place where you can have a plan that says, hey, here's, whether it's 5 projects or 10 projects, it won't be a million, but you'll be able to say, hey, here's the things we really want to commit to going forward. That's an end product of this process, is being able to get to those tasks with the help of stakeholder and planning partners. So that's our task 3. And again, I'll go into that in more detail. And the other major substantive task here is around community engagement. So beyond those folks who are going to work with us really closely, as stakeholders and subject matter experts, and as themselves land managers, we want to reach out to the broader community at specific points to get their feedback. And these may be folks that, are not themselves on their day-to-day, operations thinking all the time about recreation and planning and conservation, but rather are in the community and are affected by that. And that could be anyone from your HOAs and your PTAs to your senior community centers and rotaries, et cetera. So we want to have a way to reach out to those folks who have a lot, to offer in terms of their experiences and their vision for the community, and may want to offer that in a more targeted format, and not be with us for 8 workshops over the course of the year. So those are the 3 big pieces: the research, the leadership and stakeholder and subject matter expert kind of planning pieces, and then the community pieces. And those are what are going to come together as part of this process. And so I'm going to back up and just let Alex talk a little bit about the research task, which is, as Amy mentioned, the thing that we're launching right now, or it's going to be really formally launched tomorrow. And then I'll talk just a little bit more about the other pieces. And we're going to keep this relatively brief and informal, as you can see, because we know you've seen this through the contract process, and we just want to kind of use it as a platform to get discussion going as well. So Alex, do you want to just talk a little bit about research and analysis, and let me know if you want me to scroll through a little bit as you're talking. So, but just a high level overview of your tasks.
Yeah, sure. And I think a good way to think about this task is basically setting a baseline so that, like Julie said, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We are understanding what some of the existing priorities and challenges are, what progress has been towards implementation in previous plans and studies. And so we can kind of move forward together without having to revisit some of those baseline conditions. So to do that, we are going to be reviewing existing plans and studies. We'll also be kind of through the outreach process, trying to understand, like I mentioned, for the things that have been recommended in these plans and studies, has there been progress towards implementation? Have priorities changed? That sort of thing. We are going to collect and work off of the most recently available GIS data in terms of facilities, recreational assets, natural resources, that sort of thing, so that we are operating with a good understanding of on-the-ground conditions. We are going to be taking a dive into a recreation inventory, so we understand what the recreational assets are in the county, not just trails, but also thinking about things like accessibility, parking capacity, some of those kind of more tangential factors that you don't necessarily think about quite as much, but are really critical towards having a good experience and making sure things are accessible. And then we'll be also looking more closely at habitats and natural resources, making sure that We're not making any recommendations that would impact sensitive populations, thinking about future wildfire risk. So those considerations. Socioeconomics and tourism, we want to understand how this folds into current on-the-ground conditions in terms of socioeconomics, and also how recreation folds into what the county's goals are around tourism, and understanding, like Amy was mentioning before, the push and pull between having a tourism-based economy, but not being overwhelmed and overrun with too many folks. And then the visitor survey, which was sent out last week. Amy mentioned a little bit about this, but this is an initial survey that is going to be looking at basically recreational use patterns. So we want to understand where people are coming from, what they did that day, and what their experience was like. Did they encounter any issues, kind of as a snapshot in time, as opposed to the broader general public survey, which will be coming out later in the fall. And I think that's everything for this. At the end of this task process, we're going to be wrapping everything up into what we're calling a foundation summary. So that will provide kind of the high level conclusions that this research task revealed, and identifying areas where we need to focus more attention, that sort of thing. So it'll be a useful foundational document that we'll be able to base the rest of the planning process off of.
Question on that one.
Yes.
Or should we reserve conversation for later?
I think we could take it as we go.
Either way,
Yeah, go ahead. Well, if it's getting to be too much, we'll cut it off and save it, but let's try it this way to start. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I can just put a marker down for it. I'm interested in understanding what I'm not sure I see in this analysis is really trying to understand the different economic impacts of different user groups. One of the ways that we could try to get at that would be adding a question about, in our survey, about how are you shopping, right? But I don't know that that's the best way, because I know there's also like a lot of literature about that is out there that we can investigate. So that's just something that, as a policymaker, I think is a really important piece of the puzzle, and would like to have this analysis generate information on that.
Like, how are you shopping, like for which commercial outfitter you're selecting, or what place you're choosing to go?
Like,
You need the above.
Or did you recreate, if you recreated today, are you also spending money in?
Right, exactly, because we find somebody at a trailhead, are we also finding those people at a cash register?
Yeah.
And how much, right?
Yeah.
And are there differences between different user groups or different geographic different trailheads? That's a piece of this analysis that will be very informative to me.
Yeah.
It could help inform the same survey that we're trying to do right now with, for example, our tourism, where we're wanting to know the real economic benefit of these different things, so that when, for example, when tourism takes lodging taxes and markets, are we really, how are they advertising, how are they marketing? Does it really land people at cash registers as opposed to just generally into the area with the hope that there's an osmosis and you soak them up? So I think I understand what you're saying there, but, and there'll be more, you're presenting, there'll be more in-depth survey to follow this current survey.
There will.
But it'll be distinct. I mean, it's interesting. This is a really short survey, as I know you've identified, but I think, we'll look to Alex too, but it would be possible, I think, just to add a question, how much money, are you spending today in addition to recreating? And it could be $0 to $20 or, maybe just, and maybe that just gets at your very baseline of,
Or did you spend money today? If so, how much, or,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah. I mean, I think, and I don't know if this is the right distinction between the two surveys, but if one is more generally focused on, people who don't live in the county and who come to visit the county, and the other one is more generally focused on people in the county and who have something to say, who are talking about recreation in general, it might make sense to include that question in this survey. I don't know if that's
it would make more
accurate
sense for this.
distinction.
It would make more sense for the snapshot in time. Alex, maybe any reactions to that? Again, I'm kind of thinking it's a single one of like how much, and you start with 0, because that way it's just a single quick question check off.
Yeah, I think we can easily add that kind of a question. I think we just want to have a shared understanding about, that it's not going to give us, like a true economic impact study, like that. The way we're approaching this is not systematic enough to get that. So just as long as we're all understanding kind of on the back end that this is just going to be, all we're going to be able to say is this is what respondents told us, not
Right,
like
still anecdotal.
person spends.
Yeah.
Because that, trying to get to that, like, oh, the average person countywide is doing this level of spending is a whole nother level of analysis that we don't have scoped in here.
Yeah.
If I could just say, and I hate to drag this discussion out any further right now, but I mean, it is an important distinction as a counterpoint to, you know, the idea of including it, that this is primarily about managing recreation, which is here, and there are visitors coming to do that. And the primary purpose of this is not to study economic benefit as much as it is to try to understand how to manage what's here to make it as enjoyable but as minimally impactful as possible at the end of the day.
Right. I mean, like to focus on sustainability and mitigating.
Well, it's everything. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like the reason, we're into this for the same reason NOCO formed and all the other
Right,
counties and
right.
places are doing similar things, so.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Appreciate that as keeping that as a central focus. That said, it sounds like maybe, if it's a snapshot question, that could be in addition, and if there's not other, feedback, then I think that still keeps us within a 10-question survey.
Yeah.
And also, to your other point, Commissioner Marlin, sorry, I was using your first names. I have a bad habit of being informal. But the socioeconomics and tourism, I think we haven't, I haven't fully deep dived with Alex and his team yet on, what studies they're reviewing in that upper category of past plans and studies. But to your point, there may be some things that may or may not be specific to Clear Creek, but I know Headwaters Economics, I think, has done some research and reports on some of those kinds of topics about general spending per user group that maybe we could just kind of bring into the foundation's report, just to have a little bit of that information.
That's a really great point, and I kind of defer to your expertise as to whether you think it's worth it to have a survey question or there's another way. We just need to make sure that we have an understanding of that in this analysis.
It's just, I think it informs us a lot down the road in places other than just managing recreation, so.
Yeah, great. And the only thing that just popped into my head is, Julie, you were speaking of something I didn't mention in my opening comments, is that one of the other goals of this opening of this presentation to you all is to share in our timeline what some of the milestones are going to be for commissioner input and how we'll be, what those timelines are going to be, when we'll be coming back to you, at what point along the way, what are those, how that's all going to work, and at least what we're envisioning right now and what we're thinking there. So we didn't mention that as I was talking earlier, and so that was one of the main reasons I was coming here today. So I wanted to make sure we mentioned that.
Yeah, I'll definitely come to that, but I'll share those in the end and get your feedback.
Yeah.
The only other thing, thank you, Alex, that I'll add on research task one is just, this is happening now through, originally it was supposed to wrap up in Q3. It'll spill a little bit into Q4 just because our timeline is different from our proposal in terms of when we actually got started. But we plan to have this wrapped up in a, it was a 4 to 6 month kind of timeframe to the extent possible. And again, that becomes foundational and gets incorporated in the foundation's report. It does provide a baseline as well. I think you'll see parts of that foundation's report get brought back into the final report, and the maps and things that are created become a really good thing to both inform this process, but also to inform the future, to have that information. So I wanted to mention that. And then regarding the connection with the NOCO Codex tool, we're seeing how those evolve. Both of these things are just launching, so that's really interesting, and it provides opportunities. I've been thinking a lot about where is the Venn diagram of these two processes, and the way I would describe it is the NOCO process is particularly focused on the mapping portion, right, and on the Codex tool, and both this process and the NOCO process is going to be using that Codex data, and in fact, the natural history data that Alex mentioned, biodiversity data, I mean, that's Codex as well. So it's all the same, common data sets. So that's good because you're looking at the same data. The thing that, I've understood so far for the NOCO process that it might need from the counties is to the extent possible, what data does the county have to provide on recreation and, other kinds of base layers. And there may be some things that this process allows, enables Clear Creek to share back to that NOCO process in terms of maps that are being compiled. And then from the other direction, my understanding is the NOCO process is going to be paying for some cell phone data and other things that are out of scope for this process. So, you know, there's some things we'll be able to learn from that. And whether they sync up exactly to Alex's Foundation's report or not, I think there's ways that both processes will contribute information to each other from the mapping perspective, which is great. The other thing I would say is that's the Venn diagram, the overlap of the mapping piece. This process, as Alex has just detailed, really is looking beyond just the mapping, or inclusive of the mapping, but beyond it as well, to look at past plans, to look at, you know, socioeconomics, this visitor survey. Those are all very unique to this process and are getting us to that level of scale at the county level that it lets us really dive in. And so I think in that sense, it's distinct and not duplicative, which is, again, I think a positive thing. I think that as we head into the priority identification process by the end of this year, early next, with this process, that will also be when NOCO is starting to talk big picture visioning for the region. And so there'll be nice kind of complementary tracks of what's the most important for the county, what is the region looking at in terms of its big picture, and we'll just make sure to play off of that. I should have mentioned I help facilitate NOCO places. So we're going to make sure that those connections are strong to again, make sure there's value added and complementarity and not just duplicativeness of the tasks. So that's kind of our thinking there.
You just covered about 2 or 3 of my bullet points here. I wrote on the previous page that if I had comments later.
Okay, great.
Which was, part of it was that NOCO itself, and we're not here to talk about NOCO today, but it was envisioned as a collection of these counties, this region, so that when we collected data or when we created strategies, they would inform each other so that we learned from what was going on in Boulder. We could also address the whack-a-mole theory, which is when you shut it down over here, it pops up over there. And so you can do something in your county that impacts another county. But also part of that, it was written into our memorandum of understanding from the very beginning, you know, about 4 years ago or so, was that each of us, though, is our own community and maintains our sovereignty, because we understand that sometimes larger organizations like the US Forest Service or CPW or someone might try to dictate to us what we will be, and that's not really just their choice. You know, is that it's our choice at the end of the day. Once we had that understanding, then we can come together and develop a regional vision. But it's all, that regional vision is only about, I mean, NOCO does care what happens in Clear Creek County. It does matter to integrate, but as I understand it, the work that you're doing for us is going to be specific to Clear Creek, and there'll be some crossover of information both directions. We can pull off data and pull off information from NOCO, and we'll be actually infilling that information through the Codex tool and other tools to be able to make NOCO more robust as well.
Yeah, I thanks, Randy. I agree. And that's a good segue to our next task. And I'll also just say, you know, we've observed other counties, neighboring counties are also, or have recently completed planning like this, where they've developed their own county recreation and kind of conservation plans. So we see it as each county is kind of doing their own county specific work, and then we'll look at how that tiers up. So again, great segue to our next task, which is really about our leadership team and our stakeholder and planning partners teams. So we're going to get into alphabet soup just a little bit here, and I'm going to say pretty high level. Amy and I are working on charters and like all these details, you know, for these groups and how they come together. The leadership team is basically fundamentally the land managers. It's those who have authority or jurisdiction over land, or in 1 or 2 cases are working with the collaboratives of those who do that already. That group will act as somewhat of a steering committee to help us guide the process. They may meet once a month or once quarter, or maybe we'll have a couple back-to-back meetings, just depending on where we're at in the process. But the intent is to keep all of the land management partners in Clear Creek informed and contributing to the process, and helping us think through even, you know, some of these other elements of the process, helping, you know, Alex and his team access information. And that's something we're working on launching now, and hope to have a first meeting in the next few weeks. And that's where the leadership team members that have been invited have also been invited to this meeting today, so they can hear this presentation and we can move forward from there. So again, that's kind of a steering group. And again, will help us focus on land management partnerships. The ROMP stakeholder and planning partnerships team, that's what we're calling the SPP. is really around those, it's going to be those folks who are more in their kind of day-to-day work and life working on recreation, conservation, planning issues. So they may represent stakeholder interests like different use groups. They may come with, recreation planning expertise. We're thinking it may be 20, 30 people. We're going to invite folks. We know folks will be able to participate as they can. And we're going to help have the leadership team help us generate that list of folks to invite to that group. And this group, bringing the expertise they have specifically on recreation and conservation and planning, is the group that we're going to work with to help generate draft ideas around goals, vision, and even priority projects. And then again, we'll bounce those back and forth with the leadership team, and I'll talk about milestones with this group soon too. We'll use what this group produces to create drafts for the public to react to and surveys, in broader community surveys. But this is kind of really the work engine, the workhorse of this process. We anticipate the group meeting over the course of 8 workshops, give or take. And I'll skip through this. All talking about how we'll work with us with Clear Creek on this. But the big thing that we'll work on with this group is over the course of 8 workshops or so, starting with visions and goals, we'll outline what's the community vision or goal for the Clear Creek romp. And then we'll get into more specifically the idea of priority projects. So you may have 30 things on your bucket list that you really want to work on, or maybe it's 130. But how do we narrow it down to think about the most important? And again, there'll be community input and BOCC input on that as well. And then once those are identified, we will work with this group to kind of workshop those concepts. We're not getting to a full design level on these projects where we're going to be able to go implement, some kind of new system at, one of our hotspots. But what we're doing is getting it far enough to say, this is what's needed, what the group thinks might be needed. Here are the partners who are needed, maybe to the extent we can, here's some ideas of funding support as well. And the one thing I'll highlight is that a project could be a place on a map. It could be a hotspot for a priority. It could also be something that's more of a thematic issue, right? Maybe one place has a major parking congestion issue and overuse issue. Maybe in general, a priority for the county is something like, and I'm not committing to this, but pet waste or trail courtesy or signage or something where you say, hey, we want to take this on thematically throughout our county's spots. And so projects could be very place-based, or they could be thematic in terms of things that that are generated as ideas that could affect recreation and conservation throughout the county. And that's really for this process to decide, but I was just using those as examples to illustrate. So again, early on it's vision and goals, then it's about prioritizing projects, and then it's about workshopping those projects so that they can be produced into a plan that says, hey, here's our top whatever it is, 5 or 10, and here are ideas for moving these forward. And that is the phase 1 plan. So that's the stakeholder and leadership team. And let me go to the community piece so you can see how the pieces fit together, and then we'll open it up. Again, the community engagement piece is really about having touch points with the broader community, folks who maybe it's not their day job to be thinking about recreation and conservation, but as community members are interacting, with the Clear Creek County landscape and as users and just as a community members. So once again, we're thinking 20, 30 people. We would invite to be almost kind of like a large focus group. I hesitate to use the word focus group because usually it means something smaller, but a group that comes together, is interested in this process and has touch points a few times throughout the process to dive deeper with us on some key questions. And then also importantly helps to get the word out to the broader community. Hey, there's a survey out. I just participated in a 90-minute conversation, but you should really go take the survey and provide your feedback. So that will give us more reach into the community on key issues. And the key times that we see engaging in what we're calling the romp cat, which I just think is a cute name. I picture a little kitten romping around. But anyway, the community advisory team would be this fall, as we have our foundational work done and as we're ready to launch a broader community engagement survey on vision and values and goals, so that the stakeholder can help us tee up, like here's some draft goal statements or vision, but then we go to the community and say, what are your thoughts on the vision and values and goals? Is this, how does this look to you? And we would also say, what are the, places you're most concerned about? What are the issues you're most concerned about? Because that would help us brainstorm for the priority list. So that's one point at which we use that team to have some dialogue and then also to get the word out for a community survey. And then as we develop out the actual priority projects list, we would be working with the Vermont CAT to stay in touch, keep them informed. And then when there's a draft plan or draft concepts out there, we would work with them again to dialogue around that and to get more community input. So that's kind of how we're seeing that play out. And then this takes us into, next spring, summer, when we're working through these workshops. And by next fall, we would anticipate having a draft plan and then finalizing that with community and commissioner feedback. And so the whole shebang wraps up by the end of 2023. That's the overall timeline. And so with that in mind, the scope of work includes a pretty detailed timeline, and I don't think it's particularly visually engaging at this moment, but it's certainly qualitatively informative if you want to dive into it. But I think I've covered it broadly. So just again, and I'm going to actually just stop sharing this for the moment. It's research now, getting the leadership team on board, getting the stakeholder and planning team on board after that, bringing in the community to layer into that. And as we head into the fall, we're full steam ahead on vision, goals, and then priorities, and then project concepts leading to a plan.
And I can just say too, we are planning on using the Clear Creek Forum as the main, as a web page and web tool, as a kind of hub for if we have a survey or, using as a central location for information and to be able to drive people to. We probably will also use have some public meetings thrown into this mix, which is a slightly different level than the community, than the CAT. But we haven't talked specifically, that's not reflected in the timeline, I don't think right now, but that would be part of this. There would be a couple of milestones at that level, I would think as well.
Yeah, and that's one thing we've talked about from the start is how do you balance, more distributed and asynchronous opportunities for the community to engage and what you invest into those versus meetings, which we've certainly observed, some community meetings can get 400 people and some can get 4. Right. So yeah, so we're looking at that. Formats. But that's where for this fall, we're really focused on the focus group and the kind of approach with the Vermont CAT and then getting a survey out so that it's accessible. And we'll be working with Amy and the team at the county in terms of their work on communications and just keeping awareness.
And Julie, did we map out a proposed, a set of milestones for the commissioners?
Yeah.
That we can talk through?
Yeah, that's the last point I was just going to make. So there's 4 major milestones we were thinking of for the commissioners. One is this one today in terms of the launch and the scope of work and getting this research task really launched underway. And in the process of these coming months, one thing I wanted to offer to all 3 of you as commissioners is we'd love to set up a call with Keystone and each commissioner just to talk about, anything just macro that you're thinking about. It could be, or it could be micro. Maybe you're thinking, there's a few places really on my mind that I hope get considered for priorities, or, it could be anything, but we just thought we'd set up some one-on-ones for those who are interested in the next month or so. But then the next big milestone would be in the fall. I didn't want to pin an exact time to it. It's probably October-ish, but we'll work with Amy as that maps out. But the thought is that as we get through our first set of leadership team meetings and our first stakeholder and planning partners meeting to develop a draft vision and goals, and then also a survey to go out to the community that would be about visioning and goals and community values. So we'd want to touch base with you on that. And then again, from that, we're going to get good information from the community. We'll also be starting to hone in on a priorities list with the stakeholder and planning partners team and the leadership team's help. So we want to come back before we really do the workshop concepts where we get into hey, here are the 5 to 10 priorities. We want to come back and say, here's what we're thinking of, to really focus on for the next 6 months. And so that would be a touch point with you as well. And then once those are built out, probably late spring, heading into summer next year, we would come back and share what those are. And that's what would launch us more into another round of community involvement and feedback heading into a draft plan or with a draft plan. I think exactly the timing of that is TBD, but we'd come back with those project concepts built out to share what we're learning and we're thinking about.
Okay.
So again, 4 major, that was the slightly longer view, but the 4 major today with the launch, the fall with visions and goals before we launch the community values and vision survey, winter with a draft project priorities list, and then those project concepts built out before we get too far down with a draft and final plan.
Okay.
So yeah. Great. Amy, anything else I should have touched on, or Alex, anything? And hopefully it's pretty clear the distinction between the survey that we're launching with SE group and visitor use and then the community values one that's coming in. Right. Oh, okay, good. So questions, reflections?
I already talked about
Sure, I'll jump out there. I mentioned this the last time we talked about this as well. With respect to the, not the CAT, but is it the RPP?
It's SPP.
Yeah. One of the versions of subject matter expertise that I think is important to have on this panel is people who have lived experience of recreational impacts as residents in our community. I think it's really important for those people to be in those conversations, at least, not obviously everybody, but some people who can just speak to everybody else in the room who really lack expertise. They know what it's like to drive by homes. They don't know what it's like to be driven by. Mm-hmm. And I think that voice really needs to be in there, right? So that's a comment that I have. I have some other thoughts, but I want to defer to Randy and Sean.
I can keep going for a while.
Yeah, I just have one.
Sean has some.
I have one pretty quick thing. First off, thanks for the good start here. Trying to turn my camera on. I really like the idea of being kept in the loop, and I'm having issues with my camera here, so I apologize. And I think it's in everyone's best interest if you guys figure out a way to get the 3 of us on your calendar on a regular basis as we go through this to prevent, just so that you know what the 3 of us are thinking about, which may not be exactly the same at all times. It's not to say we shouldn't continue to have public conversations as well. Absolutely, we should. I think it's important, though, that we can also, have a little bit more detailed conversations just on a one-on-one basis.
That's what I wanted to clarify, Sean. You're saying you wanted some one-on-one time on a periodic basis?
Yeah, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I mean, I have a lot of other questions, some of which probably don't warrant a public conversation.
When and let me ask it, because I was thinking you were asking for something else, Sean. I was thinking you were asking that we have a regular report in with the commissioners as a body, which would then be public meeting. Or were you saying, and then I heard Brian say, are you talking about one-on-one?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an important initiative by the county. We've been talking about this for a really long time. And I personally want to know a little bit more about the details of what's happening and having a chance to see work products, not to micromanage anything, but just to essentially give you an early warning if I see something heading in an area that I'm going to ask questions about. It would be better to have those conversations sooner rather than after the fact.
I think what I hear Sean saying, and I agree with it, is that recreation management is a complex policy with a lot of passion. We saw a process that we attempted go off the rails at least once in this community already. And so regular check-ins to make sure that if we are going off the rails, because we want this ultimately to be relevant to us as policymakers, the opportunity to catch that early would be great. And the opportunity to do that in a way that doesn't interfere with your work, right? I don't want to slow this process down. I'm looking at the timeline. Timeline's tight, and if we achieve this timeline, what that means is that Randy and Sean in their last couple of months on this board, will have an opportunity to implement some policy that we've been talking about and thinking about. At that point, it'll be the culmination of 6 years worth of conversations. I want to make sure we can hit that timeline. So that's something that's really important.
I think there's a lot of people in the room. I see Frank Young sitting out there. There's a lot of people who have been, I mean, he got here in the 80s, I think, as I recall, 80-ish.
Right.
Yeah, I got here in 71. I'm going to jump all over here for a second. I was talking to Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally from Larimer County just the other day. We had a great conversation. And she talked about, I'm not sure what her age is, but she's probably around 60. And we talked about the fact that she's been going to Rocky Mountain National Park because she grew up in Larimer County since she was, since she was, as an infant, she was laying on the picnic table. So once she was old enough to know what she was looking at, she's been able to watch a fairly wide bandwidth of time. And I just want to offer that, and these guys, Sean, George, whoever else has heard this, Amy, I know for sure, please bear with me for a second, the old war story thing. But in 1976, I got to walk former Secretary, previous to that time, Secretary of the Interior, Stuart Udall, from Loveland Pass across Grays Peak and out down to Bakerville, out Stevens Gulch, in order to survey with him and a team of other people the potential future path of the Continental Divide Trail. And we had a long discussion along the way and a lot of counterpoint stuff. And we talked about, if you build it, they will come and all of that stuff in 1976. And he said, if we get this Continental Divide Trail built here, won't it eliminate the bushwhack trails that you see? And I said, I don't think so. I think more people is more people, no matter how you do it. And at the end of the day, it will help from an engineering standpoint. He said, but all these people are all going to be coming anyway. And I said, how soon do you want them here? I remember being 26 years old, talking to the former Secretary of the Interior saying, how soon do you want them to be here? Because if you plan for it and accommodate them as quickly as you can, then you can cause them to be there so much quicker. And I'm not saying it's wrong to do good recreation planning. Obviously, this has been a dream of mine to get to this point for a long time, for around 40 years. But there's things that you see when you grow up in a community or recreate in a community, as long as Sean's been around and George has been here growing up also, that if you would think of us as not worry about us as people who might get in the way of being able to complete a plan because we're county commissioners, but just rip the county commissioner badge off of us and think of us as assets and team members rather than those other guys that are going to deal with this. And there's a second reason that's really what Sean's alluding to is we've had a couple of times where unknowingly staff has set off and hasn't included the county commissioners and spent a lot of time and effort to get way down the path with a plan that when they brought it to the county commissioners couldn't even accept. And so keeping us integrally involved enough to be able to avoid that problem is, I think, helpful to think of us as community members as well that can be there. So, and I don't know, those check-ins, I think all I'm hearing from Sean is let's make sure that the check-in and the dialogue with us is robust. So like the other people on the leadership team, we can have meaningful dialogue and avoid one of those train wrecks down the road.
And the way I think about it is it sounds like what I'm envisioning is that these milestones are like major milestones, formal report-ins where we're like, this is what we have to report. That does not preclude additional information sharing, whether it's through Brian, through me, but I think there's a little bit of a distinction between what staff can offer and what we need to incorporate into consultant tasks. And so I feel very confident that we can make sure that you guys are well informed. To Sean's point, we don't want to, the last thing we want is to be having any sort of thing happening that sends us in a wrong direction or misses an opportunity to get the valuable perspective that you bring, not just from the positions that you held as electeds, but that you bring because of what you genuinely offer as people, which is I think what you're trying to say.
That's what I'm trying to get at. okay, if I quit my job as county commissioner, can I be on the leadership team? That's what. you know,
The answer's
do I have
probably
to do
still
that?
no.
I would
but-
I'm not asking for that.
Right.
I would envision this being probably an ongoing agenda item for our one-on-one meetings as we meet together. In addition, I think for we can provide you some written updates as well
Absolutely.
that will allow you then some opportunity to weigh in on certain items as well. So I think what we're hearing is as many touch points for you as possible in this process to be able to weigh in. That's what we're hearing. So.
Yeah.
And I'm really sensitive to the fact that as a commissioner, it is inevitable. You didn't know you bought these yard signs and all of a sudden people were gonna be afraid of you or something like that, or not talk in a room in a meeting the same way they would if you weren't there. And I know that's a fact. Brian and I have talked about this a lot of times, and I learned it as an owner of a construction company. It took me a while to figure out that there were people on the job that were scared of me simply because it said Wheelock Construction on my truck and on the sign when I drove up, and I thought I was just one of the guys. So I don't want to interfere with things and be in a position where I bring that to the meeting and bring that to your work. At the same time, I'd like to have the opportunity to be able to feel free to interact, for example, or as desired with Amy or Julie, or maybe audit the occasional leadership team meeting. I think we should do it one at a time so we don't invade as commissioners, but be able to see the process and be able to hear things, to be able to catch anything or see things and take them home and maybe send a note to somebody later or something like that. But just think about that. Or it could be in the form like the one-on-ones with Brian frequently, but the way to have meaningful interaction with the process, because this one's near and dear to my heart. If there's a reason I became county commissioner, it was this one right here.
So how about if, whenever we're having a leadership team meeting with all the leaders, that we include one commissioner in each of those meetings?
I don't know that's, I don't really.
I don't know.
Let me just share my perspective on this. I think that we're trying to balance something here, which is that we need to hit a timeline. I'm worried if.
That's okay.
And so the idea that we would be reviewing surveys, for example, reviewing work before it's sent out to the public, I think is kind of a mistake. If there's a commissioner that really, really wants it, I think we have to commit to like a really fast turnaround time. And if that turnaround time isn't met, survey's launched. I'm comfortable with 24 hours max is what I think keeps us in a way where we can touch stuff, where we have opportunity and time to, and we're not slowing down the process. Because my biggest fear is that we've got a plan that's presented to a board of county commissioners that didn't ask for it, right? And we're starting at square one after spending all this money and all this time in February of 2025, right, or whichever year it is. So, and I also think it's a mistake for us to be on the leadership team, on the CAT. I think that we should be not building the plan we'll be voting on. And I think I'm happy with some one-on-ones to check in. My comment on Brian is the solution of one-on-ones with you. So I might want more direct access to the consultant.
Yeah.
And have some one-on-ones directly with the consultant. And I don't mean to exclude staff from that, but telephone games get hard and are also inefficient. So those are my comments.
Well, I think that I'm not asking to be on the CAT because I think that would be a mistake, or for us to be on the CAT. But the ability to have visibility into it on a close enough basis to be able to be completely comfortable at all times. And it's not a matter of trust of team. It's actually, I've heard that a few times. It's actually the flip side of that. It's like, no, you guys stay out. So then I become concerned that we can't be trusted to be, how do I want to say, to be able to contribute productively and to a good outcome. So I don't know what it looks like, but it doesn't have to be. I don't think we should be on something like the team. If we ask to see something, to be able to know it before it goes out, it'd be nice to have a window onto it. I don't know if 24 hours is the right number, but I agree it should be a really fast turnaround because we don't want to slow down ES and Keystone. We want you guys to get it done. I want to see it done too, and I'd like to be able to accept it and know it was behind us before I'm out of office for sure. No doubt. I'm sure we can find a balance.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm interested that we need to solve this problem right now. And I think my motivation I've heard it echoed from both George and Randy. It's essentially just to be kept in the loop so that I'm not surprised in the future in a way. And yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. And I think the idea of having Brian update us is probably a good starting point.
Yeah, and I can work with the team. We'll figure out the best way to keep you in the loop on a regular basis.
It's not onerous. I've actually got the advantage working over at NOCO because there's gonna be some, cross communication anyway, I'm sure, so. So it's actually not as probably critical for me. It's just, as I expressed, an incredibly high level, it's a high level of interest item for me. Because let me just say that day, the day that I walked from, with Udall from Loveland Pass over and out that way was in August. And it was during the week, but we didn't see another person the whole way. And I was up with my grandson 3 years ago in October. And I'd previously been up there in October too, when the snow started to blow and everything, and been all alone on the mountain there too. I was up with my grandson in October on a snowy, blowing, cold, bitter day. And we were about 700 feet below the summit, and I could see about half of the trail, a third of the trail that I could see from where I was. And with my naked eye, I could count 175 people on the trail with me at that moment. And I know that's almost 45 years later, but that's a huge difference. It's almost like the hockey stick of, you see with climate change. So what you see is that sudden thing going on, and you recognize there's something going down and we need to deal with it. We need to deal with it now. We've been talking about it for 40 years without dealing with it.
Do you have any final words for us, George,
doing that.
or Brian, or Amy?
No, just that that is what we are here to try to manage is, and do the best we can to deal with the reality that there are oftentimes 175 people out on a trail on a cold, blustery October day. And that puts us in a challenging situation when we are not resourced to manage that sort of use. And the goal of this project is to figure out a way to help us better disperse and spread and sustainably manage that use with the resources we have, and position us to get more resources, and make it so all of that stuff makes more sense for our community and our environment here. So, and I think we'll, with your feedback today, we will be able to do that in a way that works and works within the budget that we have for this project. And I think we'll be able to figure out a good plan to have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize one more time, it's no lack of confidence in the people that are here, because I've already been working with Julie now for quite a while, and I know how good they are, and everybody I see in this room I know cares a lot about this stuff, and I know cares deeply about it. So it's nothing like that. It's just want to have the best possible outcome we can. With that, I'm done.
Yeah, just last comment from me. I'm just trying to start really agnostic in terms of policy solutions. Like, I'm not sure that dispersion is actually what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, maybe not.
From my perspective, and this has already been stated, but I'm just going to state it in my own words. Why are we doing this? Because we're witnessing resource degradation. Because we hear from our residents all the time that they have quality of life and safety impacts associated with this economy. And because we need economic development, right? We need to understand how much more recreation can do for our economy. If anything. So in terms of my goals, I think, and probably in order of importance here, is to ensure our residents' safety and quality of life, protect our forests and streams in the long run, and maximize our economic benefit to our residents, as well as our public revenues to manage those impacts. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there so that everybody knows where I'm coming from.
I agree with of the things I think of, what you just said is included among them.
Well, thanks again. And it looks like we're at the end of our agenda. I believe we have an executive session. Do we have anything else that we need to tie up, any other loose ends to tie up before we move into executive session?
I think we're good.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
All right, then I will move that we move into executive session to discuss the following matters.
Right, there are two matters. One is pursuant to CRS 246402 for B and D for the county attorney to meet with the Board of County Commissioners for the purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions pertaining to entering into a new intergovernmental agreement with the Clear Creek Fire Authority prior to our expiration of the current agreement, and two, determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with regard to a new intergovernmental agreement with Clear Creek County. The other item is pursuant to CRS 246402-4E for the county attorney to meet with the Board of County Commissioners for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators with regard to a request by the city of Idaho Springs to participate in the Idaho Springs Business Improvement District.
So we're gonna do it here, second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion
Can we do it
passes.
here with the same recording she's got going on?
No, that has to close. I sent it.
Just return,
There we go.
just returned from executive session. The written minutes were kept. No decisions were made. We're back in our regular session. This is the end of our meeting for today, July 12th. We're adjourned.
Thank you, Sean. Sean, I made a
guys.
comment. Sean, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm still here.
I made a comment to these other two, but I apologize for the technical difficulties this morning. We were gonna take whatever steps necessary to ensure that does not happen again. I guess that's all I can say at this point, but we'll get to the bottom
Okay,
of it.
perfect. I think that's awesome. Luckily, we just burned up the commissioner and manager update and we're able to make it up later, but I agree with you. And I'll see you guys soon.
Thanks.